Hello, friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Been a sheriff in Collier County for 32 years. Seen hurricanes tear families apart, drug runners use our swamps as highways, and gators take more than their share of tourists. But what happened in the summer of '94 in the deep Everglades, that's something else entirely. Something that still wakes me up at 3 a.m., drenched in sweat, reaching for my service weapon. The humidity hit me like a wet blanket as I stepped out of my patrol car that Tuesday morning in June 1994. Even at 6 a.m., the Florida heat was already oppressive, the kind that makes your uniform stick to your back before you've even started your shift. My name is Sheriff Roy Hutchinson, and I'd been protecting Collier County since 1962, back when Naples was just a fishing village and the Everglades were still considered impenetrable wilderness by most folks. The call had come in just after dawn from Marcus Rodriguez, who ran an airboat tour company out on the Tamiami Trail. His voice over the radio had been shaky, scared in a way I'd never heard from the tough-as-nails Cuban who'd been navigating these swamps since he was a boy. "Sheriff, you need to get out here. Highway 41, mile marker 63. Something's happened to the Brennan family." The Brennans were tourists from Ohio, husband, wife, and 2 teenagers who'd booked a sunrise tour of the Everglades. They'd been staying at one of those fancy resorts in Naples, wanted to see real Florida before heading back to Cincinnati. Marcus had taken them out at 5 a.m., planning to show them the gator holes and bird rookeries that made for good photographs. When I arrived at Marcus's dock, Deputy Janet Williams was already there. Her cruiser parked at an angle that suggested she'd arrived in a hurry. Janet was new to the force, fresh from the academy in Tallahassee, but she had good instincts and didn't spook easily. The fact that she looked pale despite her dark complexion told me this was serious. "Sheriff," she nodded as I approached. "Marcus is down by the boats. Well, you should hear it from him." Marcus was sitting on the wooden dock, his weathered hands trembling as he held a cup of coffee Janet had probably given him. His airboat, a flat-bottomed aluminum craft with a massive fan on the back, was tied up nearby, and I could see dark stains on the seats that looked suspiciously like blood. "Marcus," I said, sitting down next to him, "tell me what happened." He looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. We were about 3 miles in, near the old Calusa shell mounds. You know the spot where the water opens up into that prairie before you hit the cypress stands. I nodded. It was a popular spot for tours, far enough into the Everglades to feel wild but still accessible by airboat. The family was excited, taking pictures of everything. The boy, maybe 16, he was asking about the skunk ape. You know how kids are. Marcus managed a weak smile that quickly faded. We stopped to look at a gator nest, mother with babies. I was explaining about how protective they get when the water started moving wrong. Moving wrong how? Marcus struggled to find words. You know how water moves when a big gator's swimming underneath? That rolling, purposeful movement? It was like that, but bigger, much bigger, and moving in a pattern that didn't make sense, circling us. He took a shaky sip of coffee before continuing. The mother, Mrs. Brennan, she noticed it first, asked if it was safe. I was about to restart the engine, get us out of there, when something came up from underneath the boat. "A gator?" "No." Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper. "I've seen every creature in these swamps, Sheriff. This wasn't anything I recognize. It had arms, long arms with fingers, but webbed like a frog. And the skin was wrong, translucent, like you could see things moving underneath. It grabbed the boy, Tyler, his name was Tyler, and pulled him right over the side. I exchanged glances with Janet. Marcus wasn't a drinker, wasn't known for tall tales. If anything, he was boringly pragmatic about the mysteries of the swamp. "What happened to the rest of the family?" I asked. "They went in after him." Marcus's voice broke. "All three of them, one after another. The father first, diving in where Tyler disappeared. Then the mother, the daughter, she hesitated, looked at me like she was asking permission or maybe for help. Then she jumped too. I tried to grab her, but she was too fast. And then, nothing. They were just gone." The water went still like nothing had happened. I stayed there for maybe 20 minutes calling their names, using the pole to search the water. "It's only about 4 feet deep there, Sheriff. I should have found something, but there was nothing. Not even bubbles." I stood up, my knees protesting the movement. At 58, I was getting too old for this job, but the county kept re-electing me, and I had a duty to fulfill. "Show me where it happened," I said. Marcus looked up at me with genuine fear in his eyes. "Sheriff, I'm not going back out there." "Marcus, we have 4 missing people. I need you to show me exactly where—" "No." He stood up, shaking his head. "I'll mark it on a map, give you GPS coordinates, whatever you want. But I'm not going back on that water. There's something out there, Roy, something that shouldn't exist." I'd known Marcus for 15 years. He'd helped us find bodies after Hurricane Andrew, had guided search parties through the maze of mangroves and sawgrass countless times. He'd faced down territorial bulls gators and water moccasins without flinching. But now he was scared, genuinely terrified, and that worried me more than any of his story. "All right," I said. "Mark it on the map. Janet, call in the search and rescue team, and get the dive unit from Fort Myers." As Marcus sketched out the location on a topographical map, I studied the bloodstains on his boat. They formed a pattern, handprints on the aluminum siding, as if someone had tried to climb back in. But the prints were wrong. The fingers were too long, and between them I could see the distinctive pattern of webbing. "Janet," I called quietly, motioning her over. "Get the camera from my car. Document everything on this boat before we move it." While Janet photographed the evidence, I made calls. First to the Coast Guard, though they had limited jurisdiction in the inland waterways. Then to Fish and Wildlife, in case we were dealing with some kind of undiscovered species. Finally, reluctantly, I called the FBI field office in Miami. If we had 4 missing tourists, it would become federal soon enough. By noon, we had assembled a search team of 12 people, including 2 airboat operators who, unlike Marcus, were willing to venture into the spot he'd marked. I rode with Tommy Sawyer, a Seminole guide who'd grown up in the Everglades and knew them better than anyone. "Marcus really saw something out there, didn't he?" Tommy asked as we skimmed across the sawgrass prairie, the deafening fan behind us making normal conversation impossible. I nodded, not wanting to shout over the engine about what might be waiting for us. The site Marcus had marked was typical Everglades, a wide expanse of shallow water dotted with small islands of trees, sawgrass stretching to the horizon in every direction. It was beautiful in its vast emptiness, but also unsettling. Out here, you could disappear and never be found. The swamp would claim you, and within weeks there'd be no trace you ever existed. Tommy cut the engine, and we drifted in the sudden silence. The other airboat pulled up alongside us, carrying 2 deputies and a paramedic, just in case we found survivors. "This is it," Tommy said, checking his GPS, right where Marcus marked. The water was murky brown, tannin-stained from the vegetation, impossible to see more than a few inches below the surface. I stood up carefully. the boat rocking under my weight, and scanned the area. Nothing but water, grass, and the occasional bird. "Let's drag it," I said. "Systematic grid pattern. If they're down there, we'll find them." We spent 4 hours dragging weighted hooks through the water, checking every square foot of the area Marcus had indicated. We found plenty. Old crab traps, the skeleton of a deer, even a rusted outboard motor from God knows when. But no sign of the Brennan family. As the afternoon wore on, storm clouds began building to the west, the daily summer thunderstorms that rolled in off the Gulf. We'd have to leave soon or risk being caught in lightning and torrential rain. "Sheriff Hutchinson," Deputy Collins called from the other boat. "I've got something." We motored over to where Collins was leaning over the side, holding the drag rope. "It's heavy," he said, straining. "Really heavy. But it's moving weird, like it's—" The rope went slack suddenly, nearly sending Collins tumbling backward. He pulled it up, and we all stared at what was attached to the hook. It was flesh, definitely, but unlike anything I'd seen. Translucent, like Marcus had described, with a texture like jellyfish but thicker, more substantial, and underneath the surface I could swear I saw movement. Not blood vessels, but something else, something that pulsed with purpose. "What the hell is that?" Janet whispered. Before anyone could answer, the water around both boats began to churn. Not violently, but deliberately, as if something large was moving just below the surface. Tommy immediately started the airboat engine. "We're leaving," he announced. "Now." I wanted to argue, to insist we stay and investigate, but the look in Tommy's eyes stopped me. He'd grown up on these waters, had Seminole blood that went back generations in the Everglades. If he said we needed to leave, we left. As we raced back toward the dock, I looked back and saw them, just for a moment. Shapes in the water, following us. They stayed just below the surface, but I could see their outlines. Humanoid, but wrong. Too long in the limbs, moving with an undulating motion that was nothing like swimming. They followed us for about a mile before disappearing back into the deeper water. Back at the dock, I sent the tissue sample to the University of Florida's Marine Biology Department and filed my initial report. 4 missing persons, presumed drowned, though I didn't include the details about what we'd seen. Not yet. I needed more evidence before I put something that crazy in an official document. That night, I sat in my office going through old files, looking for similar cases. What I found chilled me more than anything I'd seen that day. Over the past 40 years, there had been dozens of unexplained disappearances in this exact area of the Everglades. Always tourists, always in groups, always vanishing without a trace. The cases had been attributed to drowning, gator attacks, getting lost in the maze of waterways. But the pattern was there if you looked for it. Deputy Williams knocked on my door around midnight, looking exhausted but determined. "Sheriff, I've been doing some research," she said, laying a stack of printouts on my desk. "There are legends about this area. Calusa Indian stories about things that lived in the water before humans came to Florida. They called them the Dwellers Beneath and avoided certain parts of the Everglades." "Janet, you're not seriously suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything, Sheriff. But Marcus Rodriguez saw something. We all saw something today. And 4 people are missing." She pulled out one particular paper. This is from a Spanish explorer's journal from 1598. He describes creatures in the swamps of Florida that match what Marcus described. Long-limbed, translucent, dwelling in the deep water. I leaned back in my chair, feeling every one of my 58 years. "So, what are you proposing we do? Tell the FBI we're looking for swamp monsters?" "No," she said. "But we need to go back, with proper equipment. Underwater cameras, maybe a team of divers who know what they might be facing. Those people might still be alive somewhere. Alive? Janet, it's been over 12 hours. Even if they weren't drowned. What if they weren't? She interrupted. What if these things, whatever they are, took them somewhere? We owe it to the families to find out. She was right, of course. As much as I wanted to write this off as a tragic accident, I couldn't ignore what we'd all seen. Something had taken the Brennan family, and it was my job to find out what. All right, I said. First thing tomorrow, we go back. Full team, proper equipment. And Janet, let's keep this between us for now. The last thing we need is a panic or a bunch of monster hunters descending on the Everglades. She nodded and left, but I stayed in my office until dawn, reading through those old files, studying the patterns. As the sun came up over the sawgrass prairies, painting them gold, I made a decision. Whatever was out there in the water, whatever had been taking people for decades, maybe centuries, it was time someone stopped it. The next morning brought no relief from the oppressive heat. If anything, it was worse. The humidity so thick you could practically swim through the air. I arrived at the station at 5 a.m. to find Special Agent Diana Foster from the FBI Miami office already waiting in my office, looking immaculate despite the early hour and the weather. "Sheriff Hutchinson," she said, standing to shake my hand. Her grip was firm, professional. "I understand you have 4 missing tourists. News travels fast," I said, pouring myself coffee from the pot Janet had already started. 4 missing persons from Ohio, last seen on a guided tour of a national preserve. Yes, that gets our attention. She pulled out a tablet, swiping through what I assumed was my report from yesterday. "Your initial report is sparse on details. We're still investigating," I said carefully. "The Everglades are tricky. People go missing out there more often than we'd like." She studied me for a moment. "Sheriff, I've been with the Bureau for 12 years. I've seen my share of strange cases, especially here in Florida. If there's something unusual about this disappearance, I need to know about it." Before I could respond, Janet burst through the door, her face flushed with excitement and fear. "Sheriff, you need to see this. The tissue sample we sent to UF, Dr. Martinez just called. He's driving down here personally because he doesn't want to discuss it over the phone." Agent Foster raised an eyebrow. "Tissue sample?" I sighed, so much for keeping this quiet. "We found some unusual organic matter at the scene. Agent Foster, what I'm about to show you is going to sound insane, but I need you to keep an open mind." I showed her Marcus's full statement, the photographs from the boat and the preliminary report from Drs. Martinez that Janet had just received. Foster read in silence, her expression never changing. "You're telling me," she said finally, "that you believe some kind of undiscovered aquatic species took the Brennan family?" "I'm telling you what we found," I replied. "Make of it what you will." She was quiet for a moment, then pulled out her phone. "I need to make a call. There's someone you should meet." An hour later, Dr. Robert Martinez from the University of Florida arrived, looking like he'd driven the whole way at 90 miles per hour. He was a small man, mid-40s, with wild hair and excited eyes behind thick glasses. "Sheriff, Agent Foster," he said, barely pausing for pleasantries. "The tissue sample you sent, it's extraordinary, unlike anything in the taxonomic record." He pulled out a laptop, showing us microscopic images of the tissue. The cellular structure is partially mammalian, but with characteristics of amphibians and even some markers I've only seen in deep-sea creatures. The DNA is... He paused, searching for words. "It's chimeric, like multiple species somehow fused at the genetic level." "Is it natural?" Foster asked. "Define natural," Martinez replied. "It exists, so in that sense, yes. But could it have evolved normally? I don't see how. This would require millions of years of isolated evolution in very specific conditions. The Everglades have been here for thousands of years, I pointed out. Yes, but this... Martinez pulled up another image. This is older, much older. The cellular decay rate suggests this tissue could be from an organism that's hundreds, maybe thousands of years old. The room fell silent as we absorbed this information. Janet was the first to speak. Dr. Martinez, could something like this survive in the Everglades without being discovered until now? The Everglades cover 1.5 million acres, he said. Most of it is inaccessible except by airboat, and even then, there are areas no one goes. Deep water channels, underground cave systems connected to the aquifer. If something wanted to stay hidden, it could. Agent Foster stood up. I need to contact my office. This is now a federal investigation. Sheriff, I'll need all your files on similar disappearances in the area. As she stepped out to make her calls, Tommy Sawyer arrived with 3 other Seminole guides. I'd asked him to bring people who knew the old stories, the legends that most dismissed as folklore. The eldest, a man named Joseph Osceola, who had to be pushing 80, sat down heavily in my office chair. His eyes were milky with cataracts, but his voice was strong. My grandmother told me about the dwellers, he said without preamble. Her grandmother told her, and so on, back to before the white men came. They live in the deep places, the caves beneath the water. They take people sometimes, have always taken people. Why? Janet asked. What do they do with them? Joseph shrugged. No one who's taken ever comes back to say. But the old stories say they're studying us, learning about us, that they're waiting for something. Waiting for what? I asked. For the water to rise, he said simply. For their domain to expand. Florida wasn't always above water, Sheriff, and it won't always be. Foster returned, her expression grim. My office is sending a specialized team. They'll be here by this afternoon. In the meantime, they want us to keep this quiet. No media, no public warnings. We can't have a panic. What about the Brennan family? Janet demanded. We're just giving up on them. No, Foster said. We're going back out there, but with proper support this time. The team that arrived from Miami was unlike anything I'd expected. 6 people in unmarked vans, carrying equipment I'd never seen before. Their leader, a man who introduced himself only as Collins, had the bearing of military special forces. We're going to establish a perimeter around the area of interest, he explained, spreading a satellite map on my desk. Underwater cameras, motion sensors, thermal imaging. If anything moves down there, we'll know about it. You've dealt with something like this before, I said. It wasn't a question. Collins gave me a look that said more than words could. Let's just say the Everglades aren't the only place where things that shouldn't exist sometimes do. We returned to the site that afternoon with a convoy of boats and equipment. The FBI team worked with efficient precision, setting up their monitoring station on a small tree island about 100 yards from where the Brennans had disappeared. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, the underwater cameras started transmitting. At first, there was nothing but murky water and the occasional fish. Then, just as darkness fell, movement. There, one of the technicians said, pointing at a monitor. Sector 3, about 15 feet down. We all crowded around the screen. The image was grainy, green-tinted from the night vision, but clear enough. Something was moving along the bottom, something that walked upright, but with a flowing, undulating gait. It stopped directly below one of our cameras, and for a moment seemed to look up at it. The face, if you could call it a face, was humanoid in structure, but wrong in every detail. The eyes were too large, solid black, and and the mouth was a horizontal slash filled with what looked like filtering apparatus rather than teeth. It reached up toward the camera with one of those impossibly long arms, and the screen went black. "Camera 3 is down," the technician reported. Over the next hour, we lost 5 more cameras. Whatever was down there was systematically destroying our surveillance equipment, but we were getting data, images that proved Marcus hadn't been hallucinating. "We need to go down there," Collins said. "Send in divers. Flush them out." "That's suicide," Tommy interjected. "You don't fight something like this in its own element. If the old stories are true, they've been down there for centuries. They know every cave, every channel. You go in the water, you don't come back." As if in response to his words, all our remaining cameras suddenly showed the same thing. Dozens of the creatures, rising from hidden places in the bottom, moving with purpose toward our position. "Everyone back in the boats," Collins ordered. "Now." We retreated to the mainland, but the FBI team maintained their surveillance from a distance. Over the next 3 days, we documented dozens of sightings. The creatures, the dwellers, as I'd started thinking of them, were definitely real, definitely intelligent, and definitely aware of our presence. On the 4th day, something extraordinary happened. We found a survivor. A fisherman discovered Tyler Brennan wandering in the mangroves about 5 miles from where he'd disappeared. He was delirious, dehydrated, but alive. We rushed him to the hospital in Naples, where I waited with his parents' contact information ready, though I had no idea how to explain where he'd been or what had happened to the rest of his family. When Tyler finally woke up and was coherent enough to talk, his story was beyond belief. "They took us down," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Through tunnels in the bottom, into caves. There's a whole network down there, Sheriff. Like a city, but flooded, ancient." "Where's your family, Tyler?" I asked gently. His eyes filled with tears. "They kept them. Dad tried to fight, and they did something to him, changed him, Mom and Sarah too. They're not human anymore." Dr. Martinez, who'd been monitoring Tyler's condition, pulled me aside. "Sheriff, his blood work shows traces of the same chimeric DNA we found in that tissue sample. Whatever happened to him down there, it's altered him at a genetic level. But he seems normal," I said, "for now. But we have no idea what the long-term effects might be." That night, I sat by Tyler's bedside as he slept fitfully. Agent Foster was coordinating with her superiors, trying to decide what to do about the dwellers. Collins and his team were planning something they wouldn't tell me about, and I was left with the terrible knowledge that 3 members of the Brennan family were still down there, transformed into God knows what. Just after midnight, Tyler woke with a gasp. He grabbed my arm with a surprising strength. "Sheriff," he said urgently, "they're coming. They want me back. They said I was compatible, that I could be a bridge between our species. They're coming for me." "Tyler, you're safe here. The hospital has security." "You don't understand," he interrupted. "They don't need to come on land. They're already here. In the pipes, the water system. They can go anywhere water goes." As if on cue, the lights flickered and went out. In the darkness, I heard something wet moving in the walls. The emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in a sickly red glow. I drew my service weapon, though I knew it would be useless against whatever was coming through the walls. Tyler was sitting up in his hospital bed, his eyes wide with terror, but also something else. Recognition. "They're speaking to me," he whispered, "in my head. They say I belong with them now." Water began seeping through the air conditioning vents, too much to be condensation. It pooled on the floor, and in it I could see movement. Not quite solid, like living liquid. "Tyler, we need to get you out of here," I said, helping him to his feet. But as we reached the door, it opened and Janet burst in. "Sheriff, the whole hospital is flooding. The basement is completely underwater and it's rising fast." Agent Foster appeared behind her. Her usually perfect composure cracked. "My team lost contact with Collins. His last transmission was that they'd found an entrance to the cave system and were going in." "Damn fool," I muttered. Tommy warned him not to go in the water. The building shook, and through the window I could see water rising in the parking lot. Not from rain, but bubbling up from the storm drains and sewers. The dwellers weren't just coming for Tyler, they were bringing their domain to us. "Everyone to the roof," I ordered. We made our way through the hospital, helping evacuate patients and staff. The water rose impossibly fast, defying physics. By the time we reached the stairwell to the roof, it was ankle-deep on the 3rd floor. On the roof, about 40 of us huddled in the humid night air. The entire area around the hospital was flooded, water stretching as far as we could see in the emergency lights. And in that water, things moved. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Tyler stood at the edge of the roof, staring down. "They're beautiful," he said dreamily. "Once you understand them, they're beautiful." "Tyler, stay back from the edge," I warned, but he didn't seem to hear me. Dr. Martinez was furiously working on his laptop, connected to the hospital's satellite internet. "Sheriff, look at this. I've been analyzing the DNA sequences. These creatures, they're not invaders or even natural evolution. They're us." "What are you talking about?" "The human DNA markers in their genetic structure. It's not contamination. These things were human once, thousands of years ago. They've been genetically modified, adapted for aquatic life. This is advanced bioengineering far beyond our current capabilities." "That's impossible," Foster said. "Humans didn't have that technology thousands of years ago." "Our ancestors didn't," Martinez corrected. "But what if there was a previous civilization? One that faced rising sea levels just like we are now? What if they chose to adapt rather than die?" A massive form breached the water near the building. Not one of the dwellers, but something else. It was like seeing a living building made of translucent flesh, with thousands of the smaller creatures attached to it like cells in a larger organism. It pulsed with bioluminescent light, and when it did, Tyler screamed and clutched his head. "They're showing me," he gasped. "The past, their history. Oh God, there were cities, beautiful cities beneath the waves. They chose this. When the water rose before, they chose to change rather than leave." The massive creature extended something like a tentacle, but made of hundreds of interlinked dwellers toward the roof. Everyone backed away except Tyler, who walked forward as if in a trance. "Tyler, no!" I grabbed him, but he was stronger than he should have been. Much stronger. "They don't want to hurt us, Sheriff," he said, his voice overlaid with harmonics that weren't quite human. "They want to save us. The water is rising again. The ice is melting. Florida will be underwater within a century. They're offering us a choice. Evolve or die." The tentacle thing reached the roof, and where it touched, the concrete began to change, becoming organic, coral-like. Foster opened fire, her bullets having no effect on the translucent flesh. The thing ignored her, focusing on Tyler. Then I heard Colin's voice crackling through Foster's radio. "Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage. I'm coming up." A figure emerged from the water, climbing up the transformed wall of the hospital. It was Collins, but like Tyler, he'd been changed. His skin had a translucent quality, and his fingers were webbed. But his eyes were still human, still aware. "Stand down," he said to Foster. "I've been down there, I've seen it. They're not our enemy." "Collins, what did they do to you?" Foster demanded. "They showed me the truth," he said. 20,000 years ago, when the last ice age ended and the seas rose, one branch of humanity chose to adapt. They've been waiting down there ever since, watching us repeat their mistakes. Now they're offering us the same choice they made. "This is insane," Foster said. "Is it?" Collins asked. "Miami floods at high tide now. The Maldives are disappearing. New Orleans is below sea level. How long before we're all underwater? They're offering us a way to survive." The massive creature pulsed again, and this time I felt it. Not in my head, but in my bones, my DNA. It was communicating on a cellular level, showing us what we could become. I saw visions of underwater cities more beautiful than anything on land, of humans transformed but not lost, living in harmony with the ocean. "What about the Brennan family?" I asked. "You said they were changed against their will." Tyler shook his head. "They weren't forced. When they saw what I saw, understood what was being offered, they chose it. They're still alive, Sheriff, still themselves, just more." As if summoned by his words, 3 figures emerged from the water. Even transformed, I recognized them, the rest of the Brennan family. Mrs. Brennan raised a webbed hand in a gesture that was unmistakably a wave. "Tyler!" she called, her voice carrying despite the distance. "Come home, son. Come back to us." "Mom?" Tyler moved toward the edge of the roof. "This is a trick," Foster insisted. "Some kind of mind control." "No," Dr. Martinez said quietly, staring at his laptop. "The genetic markers don't lie. That's really them. Transformed, but still them. Their brain patterns, their essential DNA, it's all intact. They've been upgraded, not replaced." The hospital shook again, and I realized the water was receding. The dwellers were withdrawing, but the transformed sections of the building remained. A reminder, a promise, a threat? I couldn't tell. "You have a choice," Collins said. "All of humanity does. We can fight them and lose. They control the water, and water is everywhere. We can ignore them and drown when the seas rise. Or we can join them and survive." "There has to be another way," I said. "Maybe," Collins admitted. "They're not unreasonable. They've offered to share their technology, to help us build floating cities, underwater habitats. But they want recognition, rights. They want to be acknowledged as citizens of Earth, which technically they are. They've been here longer than our civilization." The massive creature sank back beneath the surface, and most of the dwellers went with it. But the Brennan family remained, waiting in the water below. "I have to go," Tyler said. "I can feel it in my cells. I'm changing whether I want to or not. At least this way I'll be with my family." "Tyler, please," I said. "There has to be another way." He smiled sadly. "Maybe there is, Sheriff, but not for me. The transformation has already started. In a few days, I'll need water to breathe. This is my choice. Go with my family or die gasping for air that my lungs can no longer process." He walked to the edge of the roof and dove. It was a perfect dive, barely a splash. When he surfaced, he was already different, his skin taking on that translucent quality. His family surrounded him, and together they disappeared beneath the surface. Agent Foster was on her radio calling for backup, for containment teams, for anyone who could help make sense of this. But I knew it was too late for containment. The secret was out. Over the next few hours, as we waited for rescue, Dr. Martinez showed us more of his research. The dwellers had been sending signals for decades, maybe centuries. Chemical markers in the water, genetic information in the fish we caught, even viral DNA that had been slowly preparing our bodies for the possibility of transformation. "We've been breathing in their messages for generations," he explained. "Every person who's ever lived near the ocean has trace amounts of their genetic material. We're all potential converts, given the right trigger. Like Tyler, I said. Like Tyler. His immersion in their environment activated dormant genes that we all carry. The question isn't whether we can become like them, but whether we choose to. As dawn broke over the flooded landscape, helicopters arrived to evacuate us. The water had receded to normal levels, leaving only the transformed sections of the hospital as evidence of what had occurred. Foster's superiors arrived, men and women in black suits who asked questions, but provided no answers. Collins disappeared during the evacuation. One moment he was there, the next he was gone. His clothes were found neatly folded by the water's edge. He'd made his choice. 3 months after the hospital incident, I sat in my office reading the official report. 4 tourists drowned in the Everglades. Bodies never recovered. Case closed. The hospital flooding was attributed to a freak storm surge despite the lack of any storm. The transformed sections of the building were demolished, the debris buried in a location that remained classified. But the truth has a way of seeping out, like water through cracks. Reports came in daily now. Sightings of transformed humans in coastal areas worldwide. Unexplained genetic mutations in newborns near the ocean. Entire fishing villages disappearing overnight only to be spotted weeks later. Changed, living beneath the waves. Janet knocked on my door, entering with a stack of new files. She'd been promoted to detective after the Brennan case, though we both knew the promotion was partly to ensure her silence. 3 more families this week, she said, placing the files on my desk. All tourists, all last seen near water. But Sheriff, look at this. She pulled out a photograph from one of the files. It was taken by a charter boat captain off Key West. A group of people standing on a submerged sandbar that shouldn't exist, waving at the boat. Among them, clearly visible, were the Brennans, all 4 of them, looking happy. They're not hiding anymore, Janet observed. No, they're not. The phone rang. It was Agent Foster, now heading a new division tasked with managing what the government was calling aquatic human relations. Sheriff, we need to talk. Can you come to Miami? The meeting was in a nondescript federal building overlooking Biscayne Bay. The room was full of people I didn't recognize. Scientists, military officials, politicians. Foster stood at the front with a presentation that would have seemed like science fiction just months ago. The situation is accelerating, she began. We now have confirmed populations of transformed humans in every ocean. They're organized, they're growing, and they're making demands. She clicked to the next slide, a map showing sea level rise projections. According to their representatives, we have less than 50 years before most of Florida is underwater. They're offering 3 options: transform and join them, accept their help in building adaptive infrastructure, or face extinction. Representatives? Someone asked. Foster nodded. Collins has been serving as an intermediary. He can still communicate with us, though he can only survive out of water for limited periods now. As if on cue, Collins entered the room in a wheelchair being pushed by an aide. He was in a water-filled suit that covered his body, with a breathing apparatus over his transformed gills. He looked alien and human simultaneously. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice modulated through a speaker. "I know I look frightening, but I need you to understand. I'm still me, still human in every way that matters, just adapted for a different environment." He gestured to the map. The dwellers, though they prefer to be called the adapted, have technology that could save millions of lives. Underwater cities that are already built and waiting. Genetic modifications that are reversible if we develop the technology. They're not invaders. They're our cousins, trying to save us from the fate they saw coming millennia ago. "Why should we trust them?" a general asked. They've been taking people for decades, studying us, Collins corrected, learning our languages, our cultures, our biology. Every person they took was given a choice: return to land with no memory of the experience, or stay and begin the transformation. Most chose to forget. Some, like the Brennans, chose to transform. That's not what Tyler said, I interjected. He said he had no choice, that the transformation started automatically. Collins turned to me, and I could see pain in his still human eyes. Tyler was unique. His genetics were particularly compatible. For him, even brief exposure triggered the change. But Sheriff, ask yourself, if you had the choice between drowning as the waters rise or adapting to live beneath them, what would you choose? The room erupted in arguments. Some called for military action, others for negotiation. The scientists wanted to study the transformation process, while the politicians worried about public panic. Foster raised her hand for silence. The decision has already been made at the highest levels. We're going to establish formal diplomatic relations with the adapted. An embassy of sorts in the Everglades where this all started. You're joking, someone said. I'm not. The President has signed a classified executive order recognizing them as a subspecies of humanity with full rights and protections. In exchange, they'll share their technology and help us prepare for the coming changes. I left that meeting with my head spinning. The world had changed in ways we were only beginning to understand. On the drive back to Collier County, I stopped at the spot where the Brennans had disappeared. It was sunset, the water golden in the fading light. Standing on the dock, I saw them. Not the Brennans, but other adapted, just beneath the surface, watching me. One surfaced partially. It might have been Marcus Rodriguez, but the transformation made it hard to tell. "Sheriff," it said in a voice like water over stones. "The offer stands for you too. The water remembers you. You've been marked as a friend." "I'm not ready," I said. "Maybe I'll never be ready." "The water is patient," it replied. "But not infinitely so. The choice will come to all who live near the sea. Better to choose than have it chosen for you." It sank back beneath the surface, leaving only ripples. That was 5 years ago. Now, in 1999, as I write this account, the transformation of our world is no longer hidden. Coastal cities have adapted sections where transformed humans live in flooded districts. The technology they've shared has revolutionized everything from medicine to agriculture. Children born near the ocean often show genetic markers for aquatic adaptation. Tyler Brennan visited me last week. He can survive on land for a few hours at a time with the right equipment. He's studying to be a liaison between our species, or rather, between the two branches of humanity. "Do you regret it?" I asked him. "How can I regret becoming something more than I was?" He replied, "I can explore parts of the earth no human has ever seen. I can dive to depths that would crush a normal human. I've seen cities older than civilization, Sheriff. I've swum with creatures that predate the dinosaurs. I've found beauty in the darkness of the deep ocean. But you've lost your humanity," I said. "Have I? I still love my family. I still remember my life before. I still dream, hope, fear. I'm just experiencing it all through a different lens. We're not losing our humanity, Sheriff. We're expanding it." Janet chose to transform last month. She left a note saying she couldn't watch the waters rise and do nothing. She's part of the new Aquatic Division of Law Enforcement now, policing the boundaries between wet and dry, helping those who choose to transform adapt to their new existence. Me, I'm still here, still human, still Sheriff of Collier County. But every day, the water calls a little louder. Every night I dream of underwater cities and the freedom of the depths. My DNA carries the markers now. We all do. It's just a matter of time and choice. The Everglades are different now. What was once feared as a place where people disappeared has become a place of pilgrimage for those ready to transform. The dwellers, the adapted, have built a city there, visible from the surface on clear days, a shimmer of light beneath the water. The world is changing. The ice caps are melting faster than predicted. Coastal cities flood regularly. Millions of people face displacement. But now we have an option our ancestors didn't have. We can adapt, literally, to the rising waters. Some call it evolution. Some call it abomination. I call it survival. As I finish writing this account, I'm sitting on the dock where it all began. The sun is setting, and in the water I can see them gathering, the adapted, waiting. Marcus is there, and Janet, and even the Brennans. They're not threatening, just patient, knowing that eventually we'll all have to make the choice. Transform or die. Adapt or extinction. The water is rising, and with it comes a new chapter in human history. We're not the first civilization to face this choice, and if the adapted are right, we won't be the last. But we might be the first to choose transformation over destruction, to embrace change rather than fight it. I think tomorrow I'll wade in, just knee-deep, just to see what it feels like, to understand what Tyler meant when he said the water remembers. To prepare for the choice I know is coming, because in the end we all return to the water. The only question is whether we return as corpses or as something new, something adapted for the world that's coming. The Everglades taught me that. The dwellers taught me that. And soon, very soon, we'll all learn that lesson. The water is patient, but it's also inevitable. And when it finally claims Florida, as it will, as it must, will we sink beneath the waves as victims, or rise from them as something more? I guess we'll find out. 41 years wearing this badge in Hillsborough County. Seen Tampa grow from a sleepy port town to a sprawling city. Handled everything from drug runners using our bay as a highway to serial killers hunting in Ybor City's shadows. But the summer of '88, that's when I learned some murders aren't meant to be solved. Some truths are better left buried in the humid Florida soil. The call came in at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in August 1988. I'd been sheriff of Hillsborough County for 15 years by then, and middle-of-the-night calls were nothing new. But something about this one felt different from the moment I picked up the phone. "Sheriff Walsh?" The voice belonged to Deputy Ray Kendricks, one of my best. He sounded shaken, which immediately put me on edge. Ray had served 2 tours in Vietnam before joining the force. Not much rattled him. "What is it, Ray?" "You need to get out here, Sheriff. Bayshore Boulevard, near the Platte Street Bridge. We've got... Christ, I don't even know how to describe it." "Multiple victims." "Yes, sir. 4, maybe 5. It's hard to tell." He paused, and I heard him take a shaky breath. "Sheriff, I've been on the force 12 years. I've never seen anything like this." I was already pulling on my uniform. My wife, Mary, stirred beside me, but didn't wake. After 35 years of marriage, she'd learned to sleep through these late-night calls. "Secure the scene. Nobody in or out except essential personnel. I'm on my way." The drive from my house in Temple Terrace to Bayshore Boulevard usually took 25 minutes. I made it in 15, my cruiser's lights painting the empty streets red and blue. Bayshore was Tampa's showpiece, a long waterfront road lined with million-dollar homes where the city's elite jogged every morning and watched sunset over Tampa Bay every evening. As I approached the scene, I saw the flashing lights of at least a dozen patrol cars, their beams creating a bizarre light show against the pre-dawn darkness. Ray had cordoned off a section near one of the small parks that dotted the waterfront. I could see officers standing around, some bent over as if sick, others just staring at something I couldn't yet see. Ray met me at the perimeter, his face pale in the strobing lights. "Sheriff, before you go in there, you need to prepare yourself." I'd known Ray Kendricks for over a decade. He'd pulled bodies from burning helicopters in Nam. If he was warning me, it was serious. "Tell me what we've got." 5 victims, all appearing to be in their 20s or 30s. 3 male, 2 female. They're, he struggled for words, arranged, sir, positioned. This wasn't random violence. This was deliberate, planned. I ducked under the crime scene tape and walked toward the cluster of officers. They parted as I approached, and I saw what had shaken my veteran deputy. The bodies were arranged in a perfect pentagram, each one at a point of the star. They were naked, their skin so white it almost glowed in the harsh light of the portable floods we'd set up. But it was what had been done to them that made my stomach turn. Each body had been completely drained of blood. Not a drop remained on the ground, despite what appeared to be massive wounds on their necks. The precision was surgical. 2 puncture wounds on each throat, perfectly placed over the carotid artery. But these weren't small punctures. Something had torn into them with considerable force. Dr. Patricia Hernandez, the county medical examiner, was already on scene, crouched beside one of the bodies with her kit open beside her. "Patricia," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the horror before me. "What are we looking at?" She stood slowly, her usually composed face troubled. "James, I've been doing this for 20 years and I've never seen anything like it. These people were exsanguinated, completely drained of blood. Based on liver temperature, I'd say they died between midnight and 1 a.m. All at the same time? Within minutes of each other, yes." She pointed to the wounds. "These aren't knife wounds. They're bite marks. But not from any animal I can identify. The spacing suggests a mouth similar to human dimensions, but the puncture depth. Whatever did this had canines at least 3 inches long." "That's impossible," I said. "Yes," she agreed simply. "It is." I studied the scene more carefully. The pentagram was perfect, drawn in the sand with mathematical precision. Each body was positioned identically, arms spread, legs together, heads pointing outward from the center of the star. There were symbols drawn around the perimeter, characters I didn't recognize. "Have we ID'd any of them?" I asked Ray. "Not yet. No clothes, no wallets, nothing. We're running prints now." I noticed something else. Despite being on a public beach, there were no footprints other than our own. The sand around the bodies was smooth, undisturbed, except for the drawn symbols. "How the hell did someone arrange 5 bodies here without leaving tracks?" I muttered. "That's not the strangest part," Ray said. He led me to the center of the pentagram, where I hadn't noticed a 6th element, a wooden stake driven into the sand. Impaled on it was what looked like an old leather-bound journal. "Don't touch it," Patricia warned. "Not until we photograph everything." But I could see the cover from where I stood. Written in what looked like dried blood was a single word: beginning. By the time the sun rose over Tampa Bay, we had a 3-block perimeter established and a growing crowd of onlookers and media. I'd called in every available detective, uniformed officer, and even borrowed some deputies from Pinellas County. The FBI had been notified, though they wouldn't arrive until afternoon. Detective Marcus Thompson, my lead investigator, had been working the scene for hours. Marcus was Tampa-born and raised, knew the city better than anyone. His grandfather had been one of the first black officers on the force back in the 50s, and Marcus carried that legacy with pride and determination. "Sheriff, you need to see this," he called from near the seawall. I joined him, and he pointed down at the water. There, just below the surface, was more blood, but this was fresh, still clouding the water red. "It's leading out into the bay. Marcus said. Like something bleeding swam away from here. I looked out over the calm waters of Tampa Bay, glittering peacefully in the morning sun. Somewhere out there among the million-dollar yachts and commercial shipping lanes was our killer. Or killers. Or, I didn't even want to think about the alternatives. Get the Coast Guard on the line, I ordered. I want every boat that was in the bay last night checked. And Marcus, get that journal to the lab, but I want photographs of every page on my desk within the hour. As I turned to leave, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. One of the victims, a young woman with long dark hair, had her eyes open. But they weren't the clouded eyes of death I'd seen hundreds of times. They were clear, aware, and tracking my movement. "Patricia!" I shouted. "This one's alive!" The medical examiner rushed over, immediately checking for vitals. "That's impossible. She has no blood, no pulse, no... Wait." Patricia pulled back, her face white. "James, her body temperature is 68 degrees. She should be in rigor mortis by now, but she's moving." The woman's mouth opened, and a sound emerged that I'll never forget. A dry, rattling whisper that somehow carried despite its weakness. "He's coming back. When the moon is dark, he's coming back." Then her eyes truly died, becoming the flat, unseeing orbs I was familiar with. Patricia and I stood in stunned silence for a moment before I found my voice. Not a word about this to anyone. Not the FBI, not the media, nobody. Understood? She nodded, still staring at the now truly dead woman. I spent the rest of the morning coordinating the investigation, but my mind kept returning to those words. Who was coming back? And what did the dark moon have to do with it? The photographs of the journal arrived as promised. The pages were filled with cramped handwriting in multiple languages. English, Spanish, and something that looked like Latin, but it was the English portions that chilled me. The blood is the life, and the life is the blood. 5 must die to open the gate. 5 must feed to hold it wide. When the moon hides her face, the old one rises from his watery grave. There were diagrams of the pentagram, exact measurements, specific instructions on the placement of bodies. This wasn't the rambling of a madman. It was a carefully planned ritual, executed with precision. Marcus knocked on my door. "Sheriff, we've got IDs on 3 of the victims. You're not going to like this." He was right, I didn't. The first victim was Jennifer Martinez, daughter of City Councilman Roberto Martinez. The second was Michael Foster, a senior aide to the mayor. The third was David, a prominent local businessman who owned several waterfront properties. "These aren't random victims," I said. "They're connected to power, to the city's elite." "It gets worse," Marcus said. "The other 2 victims? Sarah Walsh and Thomas Brennan. Sarah is Judge Walsh's niece, and Thomas is the son of the harbor master. 5 victims, all connected to Tampa's power structure, all killed in a ritual designed to open a gate. I'd been a cop long enough to know that ritual murders were usually the work of delusional individuals or small cults. But the precision of this, the impossible nature of the deaths, the woman who spoke after she should have been dead for hours. "Sir?" Deputy Kendricks appeared at my door. "We've got another problem. There's been another murder, same signature." "Where?" "St. Petersburg. Exact same setup, but this time on the beach near the Don Cesar Hotel." St. Petersburg was across the bay, another jurisdiction entirely. But the Don Cesar was one of the most exclusive hotels in Florida. If the killer was targeting the elite, how many victims? 5, sir, arranged in the same pattern. And Sheriff... Ray paused. "The bodies are still warm, but completely drained. This happened within the last hour, in broad daylight, on a beach full of tourists, and nobody saw anything." I stood up, feeling the weight of my years on the force. Get me the St. Petersburg sheriff on the line. And Ray, pull every file we have on unusual deaths near the water for the past 50 years. I have a feeling this isn't the first time this has happened. As Ray left, I looked out my window at Tampa Bay, shimmering in the afternoon heat. Somewhere out there was a killer who could drain 5 people of blood without spilling a drop, who could arrange bodies on a public beach without being seen, who could make the dead speak. And according to that journal, this was just the beginning. By nightfall, we had a joint task force set up between Hillsborough, Pinellas, and Manatee counties. The FBI had taken official control, but Special Agent Diana Roberts was smart enough to know we locals knew the territory better. She set up her command post but kept us in the loop. The second set of victims from St. Petersburg had been identified quickly. Like the first group, they were all connected to old Tampa Bay money and power. A state senator's son, a federal judge's daughter, the heir to a phosphate fortune, and 2 members of the Ybor City founding families. I was in my office going through the historical files Ray had pulled when Marcus knocked. "Sheriff, there's someone here to see you. Says it's about the murders." "Media?" "No, sir. Old woman, looks like she stepped out of another century. Says her name is Isabella Castellano, and that her family has been expecting this for 100 years. I looked up sharply. The Castellanos were one of Tampa's oldest families, dating back to the Spanish colonial period. They owned vast tracts of land throughout the county, but kept to themselves, rarely appearing in public. "Send her in." Isabella Castellano was ancient, 90 if she was a day, but she walked with the bearing of royalty. Dressed in black from head to toe, with a mantilla covering her silver hair, she looked like she'd stepped out of a daguerreotype. Her eyes, though, were sharp as obsidian. "Sheriff Walsh," she said, her voice carrying a slight Spanish accent despite, surely, being born in Florida. "My family has been waiting for this day since 1888. Ma'am, if you have information about these murders—" "Not murders, Sheriff. Sacrifices, blood payments on an old debt." She sat down uninvited, her movements graceful despite her age. "May I ask you something? Have you found the journal?" I kept my expression neutral. What journal would that be? She smiled, a knowing expression that made me uncomfortable. "The one explaining the ritual. The one written by my ancestor Diego Castellano in 1888. The one warning that every 100 years, the bargain must be renewed." I leaned back, studying her. "Ma'am, I think you'd better start from the beginning." "The beginning?" she mused. "Yes, I suppose that would be 1528, when Panfilo de Narvaez's expedition landed here. But the relevant beginning is 1888, 100 years ago exactly." She pulled out an old photograph, sepia-toned and fading. It showed Tampa Bay's waterfront, but primitive, mostly wilderness. My great-grandfather, Diego, was among the city's founders, but Tampa Bay had a resident long before any Spanish or American settlers arrived. The Tocobaga Indians knew of it, called it the Keeper of the Deep Waters. They fed it, kept it satisfied with offerings. Fed it? Blood, Sheriff. It requires blood. But when the Tocobaga were wiped out by disease and war, the feeding stopped. By 1888, it had grown hungry enough to emerge, to hunt. It killed dozens before my great-grandfather and the other founding families made a bargain. I wanted to dismiss her as a crazy old woman, but the precision of the murders, the impossibility of them, kept me listening. What kind of bargain? Every 100 years, 25 of the family's descendants would be offered. 5 at each point of the star. Here in Tampa, St. Petersburg, Sarasota, Bradenton, and, she paused, one more that hasn't happened yet, Clearwater. In exchange, it would sleep another century, and Tampa Bay, would prosper. You're telling me that Tampa's founding families agreed to sacrifice their own descendants to some thing in the bay? Not agreed, Sheriff. We're forced to. It was that or watch the entire city be destroyed. Diego wrote everything down, left instructions for future generations. But some of the families forgot, or chose not to believe. They didn't prepare their children, didn't warn them. And now, the debt is being collected. I pulled out the crime scene photos, spreading them on my desk. You're saying something killed these people as part of a 100-year-old agreement? She looked at the photos without flinching. These are the ones who were marked but didn't come willingly. When the marked ones don't present themselves at the appointed time and place, it takes them anyway, but messily. And the ones who come willingly? They simply disappear into the water. No bodies, no violence. They become part of it, part of the guardian of the bay. Ma'am, you understand I can't— Tonight, she interrupted. The Clearwater offering is tonight, at midnight. 5 more will die unless they come willingly. I know because my granddaughter is one of them. She bears the mark. She pulled up her sleeve, revealing an old scar on her forearm. A perfect circle with symbols inside it. All the chosen ones have this mark, usually hidden. Birthmarks, they tell the children. But it's the sign of the bargain. I thought of the victims we'd identified. I'll need to check. You'll find the marks on all of them, she said. Hidden, but there. Sheriff, I came to you because my granddaughter, Sophia, doesn't believe. She thinks it's just old family superstition. She won't go willingly to the water tonight, which means it will take her violently, like the others. Where is she now? At home, under guard by my sons. But they can't hold her forever, and when midnight comes— She stood up. Sheriff, I know this sounds insane, but you've seen the bodies. You know conventional explanation fails. Come to Clearwater Beach tonight, see for yourself. And maybe, just maybe, we can save the next 5. After she left, I immediately called Patricia Hernandez. Check the bodies for marks. Circular scars, probably old, with symbols inside. 20 minutes later, she called back. How did you know? They all have them, hidden in different places. Behind an ear, on the sole of a foot, inner thigh. All identical marks. I gathered my core team, Marcus, Ray, Patricia, and Agent Roberts. I'm going to tell you something that sounds completely insane, I began, and related Isabella Castellano's story. Roberts was skeptical, as expected. You're suggesting we believe in some kind of bay monster that feeds on blood? I'm suggesting we have 10 bodies drained of blood in a way that's medically impossible, arranged in patterns that weren't disturbed despite being in public places, and a woman who predicted exactly where and when the next attack will be. Marcus spoke up. Sheriff, I did some digging after you asked for historical files. In 1888, there was a series of unexplained deaths around Tampa Bay. 25 people disappeared or were found dead, all from prominent families. The deaths stopped suddenly in late August, exactly 100 years ago this week. There's more, Ray added. I found newspaper articles from 1788, translated from Spanish colonial records. Similar deaths, similar pattern, and ship logs from 1688 mentioning demons in the bay taking crew members. Roberts stood up, pacing. Even if we accept this, which I don't, what are we supposed to do? Let 5 more people die? No, I said. We go to Clearwater Beach tonight. Full tactical team, but discreet. If nothing happens, we've wasted a night. If something does, we'll be ready, Marcus finished. We set up our operation carefully. Undercover officers were placed along Clearwater Beach, concentrated near the pier where Isabella said the offering would take place. We had boats in the water, helicopters on standby, and sharpshooters positioned on nearby buildings. Isabella had given us a list of the 5 marked ones for Clearwater, including her granddaughter Sophia. We'd located 3 of them. All confirmed they had the circular marks but claimed they were just birthmarks. None believed the old stories. 2 had agreed to be in protective custody for the night. Sophia and 1 other, a young man named Antonio Ebor, descendant of the cigar manufacturer, refused. At 11:30 p.m., I was in position on the pier with Marcus and a tactical team. The beach was officially closed, but we could see figures moving in the darkness. Curious onlookers who'd heard rumors, media trying to get a story, and possibly our marked victims drawn by something they didn't understand. At 11:45, the water began to behave strangely. The normally calm Gulf waters started swirling in patterns that defied the tide. Whirlpools formed and dissipated. The temperature dropped at least 10 degrees in seconds. "Something's coming," Marcus whispered. At 11:50, Sophia Castellano walked onto the beach. She moved like a sleepwalker, her eyes vacant. Behind her, Antonio Ebor emerged from the shadows, moving with the same trance-like gait. Then the 3 we had in protective custody simply walked out of the safe house, past their guards who later swore they never saw them leave. All 5 converged on a single point on the beach, where they began drawing a pentagram in the sand with their bare hands. "Move in," I ordered. But as our officers approached, they hit what I can only describe as a wall of pressure. The air itself seemed to thicken, pushing them back. The marked 5 continued their work, oblivious to our presence. At exactly midnight, the water at the shore's edge began to bubble and churn. Something rose from the depths, not suddenly, but with deliberate ancient purpose. I've been a cop for 41 years. I've seen every kind of human cruelty and natural disaster Florida can offer. But what emerged from Tampa Bay that night challenged everything I thought I knew about the world. It was massive. At least 30 feet of it visible above the water, suggesting much more below. Its skin, if you could call it that, was translucent and phosphorescent, like a deep-sea creature that had never known sunlight. But it was the intelligence in its eyes. Yes, it had eyes, dozens of them, each one focused and aware, that truly terrified me. The 5 marked ones stood at their pentagram points, arms raised as if in worship. The creature extended what might have been tentacles but moved more like liquid than flesh, touching each of them gently, almost tenderly. "Take the shot," Roberts ordered the snipers. "No." Isabella Castellano appeared beside me, having somehow gotten past our perimeter. "If you attack it, everyone on this beach dies. This is the bargain. Let it take what was promised." The creature's appendages wrapped around each of the 5. They didn't struggle, didn't scream. They seemed peaceful, accepting. Then, in a movement too quick to follow, it pulled them into the water. The surface closed over them without a splash, and the creature sank back into the depths. The pressure holding back our officers released. We ran to the water's edge, but there was nothing. No bodies, no blood, no sign of struggle. Just 5 small piles of clothing on the sand. 25 have been given, Isabella said quietly. The bargain is renewed. Tampa Bay is safe for another 100 years. The official report stated that 5 individuals had gone missing, presumed drowned in a tragic accident at Clearwater Beach. No mention of creatures, rituals, or century-old bargains. Agent Roberts made it clear that anyone who suggested otherwise would face federal charges for inciting panic. But I couldn't let it go. 3 days after the Clearwater incident, I was in my office going through Diego Castellanos' journal. Isabella had given me the original after that night on the beach. It was mostly in Spanish, but Marcus had been translating the key passages. "Sheriff," he said, entering with a fresh cup of coffee and dark circles under his eyes. "You need to see this section." He'd marked a passage dated August 15, 1888. The creature is not evil, merely ancient and hungry. It came from the deep places, before humans walked these lands. The Tocobaga knew its nature and fed it willing sacrifices, criminals, enemies, those who chose death over dishonor. But we Europeans, in our arrogance, stopped the feedings. We called it superstition, primitive foolishness. We were wrong. When it rose from the bay, it could have destroyed everything. Ships in the harbor were pulled under. Buildings near the water collapsed. Dozens died in the first night alone. But it spoke to us. Yes, it can speak, though not with words as we understand them. It speaks directly to the mind, to the soul. It offered us a choice: regular feeding, controlled and limited, or complete destruction. 25 souls every 100 years, from the families who had grown rich from the bay's bounty. It seemed fair, even merciful. We who had profited from the waters would pay the price for our prosperity. "There's more," Marcus said, flipping pages. Diego describes the creature in detail. Listen to this. It is not one being, but many, a colony that acts as one mind. Each part can separate, hunt independently, but they share consciousness. It is older than humanity, older than any civilization. It showed me visions of the world before man, vast oceans teeming with creatures like itself, before the lands rose and trapped them in smaller seas. It is the last of its kind in these waters, it claims. The others died when the waters receded. It survives because Tampa Bay is deep enough, connected to the Gulf, a perfect hunting ground. It does not hate us, but neither does it love us. We are food, nothing more, nothing less. But it is intelligent enough to understand conservation. Take too much, and the food source dies, hence the bargain. The phone rang, interrupting our reading. It was Patricia Hernandez. "James, you need to come to the morgue. I found something in the tissue samples from the first victims." Marcus and I drove to the medical examiner's office in silence. The events of the past week had shaken us both. We'd been cops long enough to know the world had dark corners, but this was something else entirely. Patricia met us at the entrance, leading us quickly to her lab. "Remember how I said the bodies were completely drained of blood? Well, that's not entirely accurate. They were drained of human blood." "What do you mean?" She pulled up microscope images on her computer. "There's a foreign substance in their tissues, concentrated around the wound sites. It's blood, but not human, not even mammalian. It has characteristics of cephalopod hemocyanin, that's the copper-based blood found in octopi and squids, but also elements I can't identify. The creature's blood? Possibly. But here's the really strange part. The victims who spoke after death, their brain tissue shows signs of regeneration around the speech centers. Whatever this substance is, it temporarily reanimated parts of their nervous system." Marcus leaned forward. "Could it still be active?" Patricia nodded gravely. "That's what worries me. If this substance can reanimate dead tissue even temporarily, what else can it do?" My phone buzzed. It was Deputy Kendricks. "Sheriff, we've got a situation at Tampa General. 3 of the Clearwater 5, the ones the creature took, they've been found." "Found? Alive?" "That's the thing, Sheriff. The doctors can't tell." We rushed to Tampa General Hospital, where Dr. Richard Park, the head of emergency medicine, met us in a restricted ward. "Sheriff, I've been a doctor for 30 years, and I have no explanation for what I'm about to show you." He led us to an observation window. They were found floating in the bay by a fishing boat. No pulse, no breathing, body temperature matching the water. We pronounced them dead on arrival. Then, through the window, we could see 3 gurneys. On them lay Sofia Castellano, Antonio Ebor, and one of the others from Clearwater. They appeared dead, pale, still, not breathing. But their eyes were open, tracking movement. "They're conscious," DePark said. "Brain activity is off the charts. But they have no heartbeat, no respiration, no metabolic function that we can detect. They're dead by every medical definition, yet they're aware. Can they speak?" Sophia has managed a few words. She keeps saying, "not dead," changing. The transformation seems to be ongoing. I entered the room, approaching Sophia's gurney. Her eyes fixed on me, and when she spoke, her voice was different. Layered, as if multiple people were speaking in harmony. "Sheriff Walsh, you witnessed the covenant renewal. Sophia, are you all right? Sophia is here, but also more. We are joining with the Ancient One, becoming bridge between worlds. It is not death, but evolution. Where are the other two? There were 5 of you. Still changing, still deep. We 3 are fastest to adapt. Old blood, the Castellano line has done this before. My ancestor, Diego's son, was one of the 25 in 1888. Part of him lives in the deep, part of him lives in me." Her hand moved, the first physical movement any of them had shown. She reached out, touching my arm, and I felt a shock of cold that went straight to my bones. But with it came visions. The bay, as it was millions of years ago, teeming with creatures beyond imagination. The arrival of the first humans, the bargains made, the cities rising and falling. I pulled back, gasping. "What are you becoming?" "Guardians," she said. "Protectors of the bay. The Ancient One cannot live forever. Even it ages and weakens. It needs successors, those who understand both worlds. We will feed on fish and offerings, not humans. We will maintain the balance. And if we refuse, if we break the bargain..." Her eyes darkened, becoming solid black for a moment. "Then Tampa Bay dies, every living thing in these waters poisoned. The city, built on water's edge, swallowed. You've grown too large, too dependent on the bay. Without guardians, without the bargain, you cannot survive." Dr. Park pulled me aside. "Sheriff, their transformation is accelerating. Their cellular structure is changing at a rate that should be impossible. In a few hours, they won't be human anymore. What do you recommend? Honestly, let them go back to the water. Whatever they're becoming, keeping them here might be dangerous for everyone." That night, we made a decision that went against every protocol, every law I'd sworn to uphold. We took Sophia and the other 2 to a secluded beach on the southern tip of the county. Isabella Castellano was there, along with representatives from the other old families. As we wheeled the gurneys to the water's edge, Sophia spoke one last time with her human voice. "Tell my grandmother I understand now. The honor and the burden. We are not sacrifices, we are evolutionaries." They stood, all 3 at once, moving in perfect synchronization, and walked into the water. As the bay embraced them, their bodies began to change visibly. Skin becoming translucent, limbs elongating, that phosphorescent glow beginning to emanate from within. They turned back once, and I saw intelligence in their transformed features, a sadness mixed with acceptance. Then they dove beneath the surface and were gone. Isabella stood beside me, tears streaming down her ancient face. Every 100 years, some are taken to feed it, others are taken to become it. My granddaughter will live forever now, Sheriff, but she will never be human again. The next morning, the FBI closed the case. Officially, we had a serial killer who had drowned himself in the bay after committing the murders. The 5 missing from Clearwater were tragic casualties of a rip current. Agent Roberts made it clear that any other narrative would be met with extreme prejudice. But I kept Diego's journal, and I started my own, because someone needs to remember. Someone needs to prepare the next generation for 2088, when the bargain comes due again. The old families know, but they're growing fewer, their bloodlines diluting, moving away from Tampa Bay. What happens when there aren't enough marked ones to fulfill the bargain? What happens when the city forgets entirely, dismisses it all as legend? I think about that creature, ancient and intelligent, patient and ruthless. I think about Sophia and the others, transformed into something between human and monster, guardian and predator. And I know that Tampa Bay's prosperity, its very existence, hangs on a contract written in blood and renewed with sacrifice. 3 weeks passed after the Clearwater incident. Tampa tried to return to normal. Tourists still flocked to Busch Gardens. The cigar factories in Ybor City continued their rolling, and the fishing boats went out every morning into the bay. But for those of us who knew the truth, nothing would ever be normal again. I'd started investigating the old families, trying to understand the full scope of the bargain. With Marcus's help, I'd traced genealogies, property records, and historical documents going back 3 centuries. What we found was staggering. The 23 families involved in the original bargain hadn't just survived, they'd thrived. Every major development in Tampa Bay could be traced back to them. The phosphate industry, the cigar trade, the port expansion, the real estate boom, all controlled by descendants of those who'd made the deal in 1888. It's like the bargain guaranteed their success, Marcus said, spreading documents across my desk. Look at this. Every time one of these families faced bankruptcy or scandal, something would happen. A competitor would mysteriously drown, a rival's ships would sink in calm weather, opposition to their projects would simply disappear. The creature's been protecting its food source, I realized, ensuring the marked families prosper so there will always be sacrifices to give. Deputy Kendricks knocked and entered, his face grim. "Sheriff, we've got a problem. Remember the 2 missing from Clearwater? The ones who didn't resurface with Sophia and the others? What about them?" Fishing boat just pulled up something in their nets. You need to see this. We drove to the dock where the fishing vessel Maria's Dream was moored. The captain, a weathered Cuban named Eduardo, looked shaken as he led us to his catch. In the net, tangled among grouper and red snapper, was something that had once been human. The transformation was further along than what we'd seen with Sophia. The skin was completely translucent, revealing internal organs that glowed with bioluminescence. The limbs had elongated and developed webbing, and the face was still recognizably that of Monica Sanchez, one of the missing 5. But she was alive, her transformed chest rising and falling with a labored breathing. "We need to get her back in the water," Eduardo said urgently. "She's dying in the air." We transferred her to a tank on a police boat and took her to a secluded cove. As soon as she was back in salt water, her breathing stabilized. Her eyes, now solid black orbs, focused on me. "Sheriff," she spoke, her voice gurgling through transformed vocal cords. "We were too weak. Rejection, the ancient one, couldn't complete the joining. Where's the 5th, Thomas? Dead, truly dead. His blood incompatible. The marking was wrong. Someone, in his family, broke the bloodline, married outside, and the approved matches." This was new information. Approved matches? The families, intermarried. Kept the blood, pure, compatible, but some rebelled. Married for love, not obligation. Their children cannot transform, only die. She convulsed, her body shifting further from human form. "Warning, Sheriff, others know. Other things in the deep, the Ancient One is not alone. Competition for feeding grounds. Tampa Bay is prize. They come. Who comes? The drowned gods from the Caribbean depths. They felt the renewal they know. The Ancient One weakens. They come to claim the bay, the city, everything. Her body suddenly went rigid, then began to dissolve into the water itself, breaking apart into thousands of phosphorescent particles that dispersed into the bay. Within moments, there was no trace she had ever existed. Eduardo crossed himself. "Sheriff, I've fished these waters for 40 years. My father and grandfather before me. We've always known something lived beneath, protected the bay. But if what that thing said is true, we need Isabella Castellano," I said. "Now." The Castellano estate was a sprawling compound in Old Hyde Park, hidden behind walls and ancient oak trees. Isabella received us in a library that looked like it hadn't changed since the 1800s. She listened to Monica's warning without surprise. "Yes, the drowned gods," she said, pulling out an even older journal. "This one is from 1688, written by a Spanish priest who survived their last incursion." She opened it to a marked page. "They came when Spanish first settled here. The Tocobaga and our guardian fought them together, drove them back to the deep Caribbean, but they always return when they sense weakness. How do we fight them? We don't. The guardian does. But..." She hesitated. "The guardian is weak now. The transformation of the five, the renewal ritual, it takes enormous energy. It needs time to recover, to integrate the new ones like my Sophia into its consciousness. Time we don't have. There must be something we can do." Isabella stood, walking to an old map of Tampa Bay on the wall. "There is one thing. Diego wrote about it, a last resort. The city itself can be weaponized." She traced lines on the map. The Hillsborough River, the Alafia, the Little Manatee. These rivers that feed the bay, they can be turned into barriers. Salt and fresh water properly mixed with the right elements creates a boundary the drowned gods cannot cross. What elements? Blood, Sheriff, willing blood from the marked families. Not death, but donation. Every descendant of the original 23 families must give blood, freely offered, to create the barrier. How many people are we talking about? Marcus had already done the math. Based on our genealogy research, roughly 3,000 living descendants in the Tampa Bay area. 3,000 people we need to convince to give blood for a ritual to stop sea monsters, I said flatly. In what, days? Hours? Hours, Isabella confirmed. The drowned gods move with the tide. They'll arrive with the king tide tomorrow night, the highest tide of the year. Agent Roberts chose that moment to arrive, flanked by federal agents. "Sheriff Walsh, you're under arrest for conspiracy, destruction of evidence, and violation of federal security protocols." As they cuffed me, Roberts leaned in close. "I warned you to let this go. The official story stands. There are no creatures, no bargains, no threats to Tampa Bay. You're having a psychological breakdown, Sheriff. Stress of the job." But as they led me away, I saw Marcus slip out the back with Isabella and the journals. They knew what had to be done. From my federal holding cell, I could only watch the news as events unfolded. Around 3 p.m. the next day, Tampa Bay began to behave strangely. The water turned dark, almost black, and fish began beaching themselves by the thousands. The authorities blamed red tide, but I knew better. They were fleeing. By 5 p.m., the bay was boiling. Not from heat, but from movement beneath the surface. The Coast Guard reported multiple massive sonar contacts moving in from the Gulf, things the size of buildings rising from deep trenches. At 6 p.m., Isabella Castellano went on live television. The 90-year-old woman, flanked by heads of the other old families, told the truth. All of it. The bargain, the guardian, the drowned gods approaching to claim Tampa Bay. She called on all descendants of the founding families to come to Bayshore Boulevard immediately. The government tried to cut the broadcast, but it had already gone viral. Social media exploded with videos of the bay's bizarre behavior, the fleeing sea life, the massive shapes moving beneath the surface. By 7 p.m., thousands had gathered. Not just the descendants, but regular Tampa citizens. They'd lived by the bay, prospered from it, and now they came to defend it. Blood donation stations were set up along the waterfront. The marked families bled into ritual bowls that Isabella and the other elders had prepared. I was released at 7:30. Roberts had no choice. The situation had spiraled beyond any cover-up. I arrived at Bayshore to find a scene from a nightmare. The drowned gods had arrived. They were nothing like our guardian. Where it had been alien but somehow majestic, these were pure horror. Masses of rotting flesh and coral, shaped vaguely like colossal human corpses that had been underwater for centuries. They moved on legs of compressed fish bones, with faces that were colonies of eels and crabs arranged in mockeries of human features. There were 3 of them, each easily 100 feet tall, wading through the bay toward shore. Our guardian rose to meet them. Even weakened, it was magnificent. It had grown since the renewal, incorporating the transformed humans into its mass. I could see Sophia and the others within its translucent body, their consciousness part of its own, directing its movements with human intelligence combined with ancient power. The battle was brief, but devastating. The drowned gods had numbers, but our guardian had home advantage and human cunning. It used the bay itself as a weapon, creating whirlpools and currents that battered the invaders. But it was losing, being pushed back toward the shore. That's when Isabella gave the signal. 3,000 people had given blood. The ritual bowls were poured into the rivers at precise moments, following Diego's instructions. The effect was immediate. Where salt and fresh water met, mixed with the willing blood of the Covenant families, walls of energy formed. Not visible to the eye, but the drowned gods recoiled from them as if burned. Trapped between the barriers and our guardian, they fought desperately. One managed to reach shore, its massive form crushing a section of Bayshore before the combined blood of the crowd, people cutting their palms and pressing them to the ground, created a barrier that dissolved its foot into nothing. The guardian, strengthened by this display of human cooperation, pressed its advantage. It absorbed one of the drowned gods entirely, its mass doubling. The other 2 fled, sinking back into the deep trenches, wounded and defeated. As the sun set, the bay grew calm. The guardian floated near shore, and for a moment Sophia's face appeared in its mass, smiling sadly but proudly at her grandmother. Then it too sank beneath the waves, returning to its eternal vigil. The aftermath was chaos. The government couldn't hide what millions had witnessed. Tampa Bay became ground zero for a new understanding of our world. That we share it with older things, that bargains made in blood still hold power, and that sometimes the monsters are the ones keeping darker monsters at bay. I was reinstated as sheriff, though the position meant something different now. I wasn't just keeping peace between humans, but maintaining the covenant with the bay. The marked families came out of hiding, taking their responsibility seriously for the first time in generations. Blood donations became monthly rituals, keeping the barriers strong and the guardian fed. Marcus took over the task of documenting everything, creating a proper archive for future generations. The FBI created a new division, secretly monitoring other coastal cities for signs of similar bargains, similar guardians. Isabella Castellano passed away a month later, peaceful in the knowledge that the covenant would survive. At her funeral, the bay itself seemed to mourn, the water unnaturally still, reflecting the sky like polished glass. I still patrol the waterfront at night sometimes, watching for signs of our guardian. Occasionally, I see phosphorescent shapes moving beneath the surface. Sophia and the others, forever changed, but still protecting the city they loved. They're not human anymore, but they're not monsters either. There's something in between, something necessary. Tampa Bay thrives still. Its secret known, but somehow accepted. The tourists still come, maybe even more now, hoping to catch a glimpse of something extraordinary. The fishing boats go out, leaving small offerings of blood and bait for the guardian. The old families intermarry less, their bloodlines spreading through the general population, ensuring that when 2088 comes, there will be enough marked ones to renew the bargain again. But I wonder sometimes, late at night, when the bay is quiet and the moon is dark, what other bargains were made in other cities, with other things from the deep. How many of humanity's great coastal civilizations owe their existence to covenants signed in blood? How many guardians lurk beneath the waves, keeping worse things at bay? I'm 73 now, too old to be sheriff much longer. But I've trained my successor well, told them all the stories, shown them all the signs. They know about the monthly blood offerings, the maintenance of the barriers, the importance of keeping the old families connected to their heritage. Because Tampa Bay's prosperity still hangs on that contract written in blood. But now we understand it's not a curse or a burden. It's a partnership. We feed the bay, and the bay feeds us. We protect the guardian, and the guardian protects us. The water remembers, Isabella used to say. And as long as we remember too, the bargain holds. The next renewal is 65 years away. I won't live to see it. But I've made sure others will be ready. The journals are preserved. The families are tracked. The marks are documented. And somewhere in the deep waters of Tampa Bay, Sophia Castellano and the others swim eternal, neither human nor monster, but something more. They are our sacrifice and our salvation, our loss and our hope. They are what we might all become, eventually, as the waters rise and the world changes. Evolution or extinction, transformation or death. The same choice the Guardian offered in 1888. The same choice it will offer again. I sit on Bayshore Boulevard now, watching the sunset paint the bay in shades of red and gold. The water is calm, peaceful, but I know what lurks beneath. I know the price of that peace, and I know it's worth paying. Name's Sheriff Tom Brennan. Been keeping the peace in the Florida Keys since 1952. Seen hurricanes that wiped islands off the map, drug runners who thought they owned these waters, and enough strange deaths to fill a cemetery. But what I discovered in the summer of '75, hidden beneath the crystal-clear waters of our paradise, it proved that some conspiracies are real, and some secrets are worth killing for. The call came in at 4:17 a.m. on June 15, 1975. I was already awake. Sleep didn't come easy anymore, hadn't since my tour in Korea. The voice on the other end belonged to Deputy Carlos Mendez, one of my best men, but he sounded rattled. "Sheriff, we got a situation out at Sugarloaf Key, the Marine Research Station. You better get out here quick." "What kind of situation?" "Multiple bodies, Sheriff. But that ain't the weird part, just, you need to see this yourself." The drive from Key West to Sugarloaf Key took me along the overseas highway, that ribbon of asphalt that connects our chain of islands like a string of pearls. Even in the pre-dawn darkness, the Keys were beautiful. The salt smell of the Atlantic on one side, the Gulf on the other. the rustle of mangroves in the humid breeze. The Oceanographic Research Station sat on the Gulf side of Sugarloaf, a collection of concrete buildings and docks that had been built in '68 with federal money. Officially, they studied coral reefs and fish populations. Unofficially, well, that's what I was about to find out. The place was lit up like Christmas when I arrived. 3 patrol cars, an ambulance, and surprisingly, 2 black sedans with government plates. Carlos met me at the gate, his usually jovial face grim. "How many bodies?" "7 confirmed so far, Sheriff. All employees of the station. But like I said, that ain't the weird part." He led me through the main building to what looked like a laboratory. The smell hit me first. Not death, exactly, but something chemical and wrong, like formaldehyde mixed with rotting fish. Then I saw the bodies. They were arranged in chairs around a conference table, all 7 of them, like they were having a meeting. But their skin was wrong. It had a greenish-blue tint and a texture like scales. Their eyes were open, bulging, the irises completely black. Between their fingers I could see what looked like the beginning of webbing. "Jesus Christ," I muttered. "That's not all," Carlos said, leading me to another room. This one contained tanks, dozens of them, filled with murky water. In several I could see human bodies floating, all showing various stages of the same transformation. Some looked almost normal except for patches of scales. Others were so changed I could barely recognize them as human. "Sheriff Brennan?" I turned to find a man in a black suit, federal badge hanging from his pocket. CIA by the look of him. They all had that same dead-eyed stare. "Agent Cooper," he said, not offering his hand. "This facility is now under federal jurisdiction. I'll need you and your men to—" "Hold up," I interrupted. "This is my county, my jurisdiction. You want to take over, you better have a damn good reason." Cooper smiled, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "National security, Sheriff. This research station has been conducting classified experiments. The personnel here were exposed to a biological agent. We need to contain this before it spreads." Biological agent? These people look like they were turning into fish. "I've said all I'm authorized to say. Now, please remove your men from—" A scream cut through the air, high and desperate. We all ran toward the sound, finding Deputy Jim Harrison standing frozen at the door to a storage room, his flashlight beam fixed on something inside. In the corner, huddled behind some boxes, was a young woman. She was alive but clearly affected by whatever had happened here. Patches of scales covered her arms and neck, and her fingers were webbed halfway to the tips. But she was conscious, aware, and absolutely terrified. "Please," she gasped, her voice raspy like she'd been screaming. "Don't let them take me back. They'll finish it. They'll complete the transformation." Cooper moved forward, but I stepped in his way. "Ma'am, I'm Sheriff Brennan. You're safe now. What's your name?" Dr. Sarah," she managed. "Marine biologist. I've been here for 3 years. They told us we were studying coral reef restoration, but that was just the cover. The real project, God help us, the real project was so much worse." Cooper pulled out a radio. "I need containment team at the storage facility. We have a live one." "Now hold on," I said, hand moving to my service revolver. "This woman needs medical attention, not containment." "Sheriff, you don't understand what you're dealing with," Cooper said, his voice cold. "She's been exposed to Project Siren. She's not fully human anymore." "I'm still human," Sarah screamed. "I'm still me. They did this to us against our will." I made a decision that would change everything. "Carlos, Jim, escort Dr. Sarah to my vehicle. We're taking her to the hospital." "Sheriff," Cooper's voice turned threatening, If you interfere with federal operations, arrest me then, I said. But I'm not letting you disappear this woman like she never existed. Cooper's hand moved toward his jacket, but Carlos and Jim had already drawn their weapons, not quite pointing them at the federal agents, but making their position clear. The standoff lasted maybe 10 seconds before Cooper stepped back. You have no idea what you're starting, Sheriff. This goes all the way to the top. People who cross this operation don't tend to live long. Is that a threat? It's a fact. Take the woman if you want. But know that you've just signed your own death warrant, and hers. We got Sarah out of there fast, but I knew Cooper was right about one thing. I'd just stepped into something way bigger than a murder investigation. As we drove toward the Lower Keys Hospital, Sarah huddled in the back seat. I tried to get her to talk. Dr. Sarah. Sheriff, what is Project Siren? She looked at me with eyes that were still human, despite the black creeping in around the edges of her irises. They found something, Sheriff. In the deepest part of the ocean trench off the Keys, a civilization, an ancient one. What kind of civilization? The kind that was here before humans, before mammals even. They'd been down there for millions of years, waiting. Carlos glanced at me from the driver's seat, his expression skeptical. But I'd learned long ago that the Keys held secrets stranger than most people could imagine. Waiting for what? For us to develop enough technology to find them, to communicate with them. The Navy detected their city in 1969 during a submarine mapping project. They've been studying it ever since. And Project Siren? Sarah held up her webbed hand. They're changing us. The beings down there, they can't survive at our pressure, and we can't survive at theirs. So the government made a deal. They would create hybrids, humans who could live in both worlds, ambassadors. You're saying the government is turning people into fish humans to talk to underwater aliens? Not aliens, she corrected. They're from Earth. They were here first. We're the invaders, Sheriff. And now they want their ocean back. We never made it to the hospital. 3 miles from Sugarloaf, a black van forced us off the road. Not Cooper's people, someone else. The men who pulled us from the wrecked cruiser wore no uniforms, showed no badges. They shot Carlos and Jim without hesitation, execution style to the head. They would have shot me too, but Sarah did something I'll never forget. She screamed. Not a human scream, but something that penetrated not just my ears, but my bones, my soul. The sound shattered the van's windows and dropped our attackers to their knees, blood running from their ears. In the chaos, she grabbed my hand with her webbed fingers and pulled me toward the water. "Trust me," she said, and dove in, dragging me with her. I've been a strong swimmer all my life, but I couldn't have survived what happened next without her. She pulled me down, deeper than I'd ever gone, my lungs burning for air. Just when I thought I'd drown, she pressed her mouth to mine, not a kiss, but something else. She breathed into me, and suddenly I could breathe underwater. Not normal breathing, but something that kept me alive. We swam for what felt like hours, but was probably minutes, her transformed body moving through the water with impossible grace while she pulled me along. We surfaced in a mangrove thicket on No Name Key, hidden from view. "They'll kill us both now," she gasped, the air seemingly harder for her to breathe than water. "The project, the truth about what's down there, they'll never let it get out." "Then we need evidence," I said, spitting out seawater. "Proof of what they're doing." "There's someone who can help," she said. "Dr. Marcus Webb. He quit the project 6 months ago, said it was unconscionable. He lives in Marathon, if he's still alive. Then that's where we go. But first, we need to get off this island without being seen." As the sun rose over the Keys, painting the water in shades of gold and turquoise, I realized my life as a simple sheriff was over. I was now part of something that would either save humanity or destroy it. And looking at Sarah's transformed features, I wasn't sure which outcome was worse. We borrowed a small boat from the no-name Key Marina. I'd make it right with the owner later if I lived through this. Sarah navigated while I kept watch for any signs of pursuit. She had to stay wet, dunking her head in a bucket of seawater every few minutes as her gills, yes, gills, hidden beneath the scaling on her neck, started to develop more fully. "How long before the transformation completes?" I asked. "Without the final treatments? Maybe 3 days, maybe less. My body's changing faster now, like being in the ocean triggered something." Marathon was a risk. It was a bigger key, more people, more chances of being spotted. But we had no choice. Dr. Webb was our only lead. We found him living on a houseboat in Boot Key Harbor, a paranoid recluse who answered his door with a shotgun. "Dr. Sarah?" His eyes widened when he saw Sarah. "They said you were dead, all of you at the station." "They killed them, Marcus. Everyone except me." Webb let us in quickly, checking the harbor for watchers. His houseboat was a mess of scientific equipment, papers, and what looked like survival gear, like he'd been ready to run at a moment's notice. "Sheriff Brennan," I introduced myself. "I need to know what the hell is going on." Webb poured himself a drink, rum, straight, and offered me one. I took it. "It started in 1969, he began. "The USS Scorpion, a nuclear submarine, was doing deep water surveys off the Puerto Rico Trench. They found something. A city, Sheriff. A vast city at a depth of 27,000 feet. Architecture that defied everything we knew about engineering. Still inhabited." He pulled out a folder of photographs, grainy sonar images, and a few actual photos that must have been taken by deep-sea cameras. The structures were impossible. Twisted spirals of what looked like coral and metal, geometries that hurt to look at. The beings living there, we call them the Tethys, after the ancient ocean goddess. They've been down there for at least 65 million years. They survived the extinction that killed the dinosaurs by going deep, adapting to pressure that would crush any surface life. And they made contact. "They made contact," Webb confirmed. "They're intelligent, Sheriff. More intelligent than us in many ways. They've had millions of years to develop their civilization while we were still crawling out of the trees. But they're dying." "Dying?" Sarah spoke up, her voice increasingly garbled as her throat changed. "The oceans are changing. Pollution, temperature rises, acidification. It's destroying their habitat. They need to come up, but they can't survive in our pressure any more than we can in theirs. So, Project Siren was supposed to create a bridge," Webb finished. "Hybrid beings who could go between worlds. Voluntary at first. Military volunteers who were told they'd be pioneers. But when the volunteers started dying or going insane from the transformation, they started taking people involuntarily. Homeless, runaways, people who wouldn't be missed. And the research station? One of 12 facilities worldwide. The US has 3, the Soviets have 2, the Chinese have 2, and the rest are spread among allied nations. It's a global conspiracy, Sheriff. Every major government knows about the Tethys." I stood up, pacing the small cabin. "Why keep it secret? Why not tell people?" Webb laughed bitterly. "Can you imagine the panic? Telling humanity that we're not the dominant species on Earth? That there's a civilization older and more advanced than ours living in the ocean? And that they want their territory back? It would be chaos. So, instead they're creating fish people. The hybrids were meant to be ambassadors, translators. But the Tethys gave us something else along with their genetic material. A warning. They showed the project leaders visions of what's coming." "What's coming?" Sarah answered, her voice now barely human. "The rising. When the ice melts and the seas rise, they're coming up. All of them, millions. They're claiming the flooded lands as their territory. The hybrids aren't ambassadors. We're advanced colonizers. We're supposed to prepare the way. A boat engine outside made us all freeze. Webb grabbed his shotgun, peering through the blinds. "Coast Guard," he said. "But those aren't regular coasties. Look at their eyes." I looked. Even from a distance, I could see the telltale black irises. Hybrids, further along than Sarah. "They found us," Webb said. "They must have tracked Sarah somehow." "The transformation," Sarah gasped. "We're connected now. All of us who've been changed. I can feel them. They're not hostile. They're recruiting." The boat pulled alongside the houseboat. 3 figures boarded, moving with an unnatural fluidity. When they entered the cabin, I recognized one of them. Commander Jack Morrison, U.S. Coast Guard. A man I'd known for 10 years. "Tom," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that shouldn't come from a human throat. "We're not here to hurt anyone. We're here to offer you the truth." "Jack, Jesus Christ, what did they do to you?" "They opened my eyes," he said. Literally. His eyelids opened sideways now, like a fish. "The transformation isn't a curse, Tom. It's evolution. The Tethys aren't our enemies. They're trying to save us. Save us from what? From ourselves. From extinction. The surface world has maybe 50 years left, Tom. The climate change, the pollution, the wars that are coming over resources. Humanity as we know it is doomed. But life in the ocean, merged with the Tethys, that's forever." Sarah Saya stood up, drawn toward the other hybrids. "I can feel it," she said. "The collective, they're all connected. All one consciousness but maintaining individuality. It's beautiful." "It's mind control," Webb spat, raising his shotgun. Morrison moved faster than human reflexes should allow, disarming Webb without violence. "Dr. Oshibiasa, you ran because you were afraid. But you don't understand what we're offering. The Tethys have technology beyond our imagination. Medical knowledge that could cure any disease. Energy sources that would end all scarcity. All they ask is that we share the planet properly. By turning us into them. By giving us the choice to adapt or die." Morrison turned to me. "Sheriff, you're respected in the Keys. People trust you. Help us make this transition peaceful. And if I refuse, then you'll watch from the surface as your world drowns. The transformation is already beginning, Tom. There are thousands of us now, in every coastal city, every naval base. The government can't stop it because half the people running the project have already turned. We are the future." Sarah took a step toward them, then stopped, looking back at me. "Sheriff, I can hear them, the Tethys. They're not monsters. They're scared, just like us. Their world is dying and ours is about to. Maybe this is the only way." I looked at the 4 hybrids, then at Webb, still human, still terrified. "I need proof, not just words. Show me these Tethys. Show me they're not planning to just wipe us out and take over." Morrison smiled, revealing rows of sharp teeth. "I was hoping you'd say that. There's a gathering tonight, full moon. The Tethys are sending an emissary to the surface for the first time in recorded history. They want to meet with human leaders, make their case directly. Where? The Blue Hole, midnight. Come see for yourself, Tom. See what we're becoming. What we all must become." After they left, Webb slumped against the wall. "It's a trap, has to be." "Maybe," I said. "But trap or not, I need to know the truth." Sarah was standing at the window, looking out at the ocean. Her transformation was accelerating. Scales now covered most of her body, and her fingers were fully webbed. "I can feel the pull," she said. "The ocean calling me home. By midnight, I'll be one of them completely. Then we'd better get our answers before then," I said. The Blue Hole was a famous diving spot in the Keys, a perfectly circular pool of deep water surrounded by coral reef. At midnight, under the full moon, it looked like a portal to another world, which, I was about to learn, it essentially was. Boats had gathered, military, government, and civilian. I recognized faces from Washington, known politicians and military brass, but many showed signs of transformation. The division between human and hybrid was blurring. At exactly midnight, the water in the Blue Hole began to glow with a phosphorescent light. Something rose from the depths, not quickly, but with deliberate, ancient purpose. When it finally breached the surface, I understood why the government had kept this secret. The Tethys emissary was beautiful and terrible simultaneously. Imagine a being 50 feet tall, with a body that seemed to be made of living water and coral, constantly shifting and reforming. It had what might have been a face, with eyes that held intelligence older than human civilization. When it spoke, it didn't use words, but somehow everyone understood. It showed us visions, the Earth as it was millions of years ago, oceans teeming with Tethys cities. The asteroid impact that drove them deep. Their patient waiting as mammals evolved, as humans arose. Their hope that we would be partners in planetary stewardship. Their despair as we poisoned the waters. And finally, their offer. Join with them. Become something new, or face extinction alone on the land. The emissary focused on me, somehow knowing I was uncommitted, still fully human. It showed me a personal vision. The Keys underwater within decades, my hometown drowned. Everyone I knew dead or transformed. Then it showed me the alternative. Hybrid humans living in harmony with the ocean, building cities that spanned from surface to seafloor, no longer bound by the limitations of single environment. "Choose," it said directly to my mind. "Lead your people into the new world, or watch them perish in the old." The gathering at the Blue Hole lasted until dawn. I watched as dozens of people walked into the water and didn't come back up, at least not as humans. They stayed under for exactly 13 minutes, I timed it, then emerged transformed. The process was voluntary, but the pressure to choose was immense. Agent Cooper was there, no longer the threatening federal agent, but a true believer with scales covering half his face. "Sheriff Brennan," he said, approaching me as the crowd dispersed. "I owe you an apology. I thought we could control this, contain it. But the Tethys were right. This isn't something to fight, it's something to embrace. How many know about this? At the highest levels, everyone. The President, Joint Chiefs, Congress. They've all been briefed. Half have already begun the transformation in secret. They're just trying to manage the revelation to the public." "And when were you planning on telling the American people that their leaders are turning into fish?" Cooper laughed, a sound like bubbles breaking. "Fish, Sheriff, we're becoming something far more than that. The Tethys have knowledge of the cosmos, of dimensions beyond our three. They've been to space, Sheriff. Not in ships, but through the deep ocean trenches that connect to other places. The transformation isn't just physical, it's consciousness expansion." Dr. Webb had refused to attend the gathering, barricading himself in his houseboat. But Sarah had gone. And when she returned, she was no longer recognizably human. Her skin was completely covered in iridescent scales, her eyes solid black, but somehow still expressive. She could no longer speak above water, but in the shallow water by the dock, her voice was clear. "Tom," she said, using my first name for the first time, "I understand everything now. The research station, the killings. It was a faction of humans trying to stop this. They killed the researchers who were willing participants, tried to destroy the project. But it's too late. The transformation can't be stopped. Who's behind the resistance? A group called the Terra Firma Alliance. Military hardliners, religious fundamentalists, people who see this as an invasion to be repelled. They're planning something catastrophic, Tom. They'd rather see humanity extinct than transformed. Over the next 3 days, the Keys became a battleground of ideologies. The news had broken worldwide. Someone leaked footage of the Tethys emissary at the Blue Hole. Panic, as predicted, was immediate. Stock markets crashed, religions declared end times, and millions fled coastal areas. But millions more came to the coasts, seeking transformation. I remained sheriff, trying to maintain order as my county became ground zero for humanity's evolution. The transformation centers, formerly secret facilities, opened to the public. The lines stretched for miles. Families argued, split apart. Some embraced the change, others violently opposed it. Then the Terra Firma Alliance made their move. It was July 4th, 1975. Independence Day took on a whole new meaning. I was at my office when the first explosion rocked Key West. The Terra Firma Alliance had planted bombs at every transformation center from Miami to Key West. But these weren't ordinary bombs. They were designed to poison the water itself, to make the ocean toxic to both Tethys and hybrids. The chemical they used was something developed in secret military labs, a synthetic compound that broke down the cellular structure of transformed tissue. Within minutes of the explosions, every hybrid in the water began screaming. I rushed to the nearest bombing site, the Key West harbor. The water had turned a sickly yellow color, and transformed humans were crawling onto shore, their scales falling off in sheets, their gills bleeding. Sarah was among them, her beautiful iridescent form deteriorating before my eyes. "Tom," she gasped, reaching for me with a hand that was losing its webbing. "The Tethys, they're dying, all of them, the poison. It's spreading through the current. It'll reach the deep cities within hours." Commander Morrison, or what was left of him, dragged himself onto the dock. "Sheriff, the Terra Firma Alliance doesn't understand what they've done. If the Tethys die, the ocean dies. They regulate the deep currents, the temperature balance. Without them, ecological collapse," Webb said, appearing beside me. He looked haggard, haunted. "I helped them, God forgive me. I helped create the poison. I thought we were saving humanity, but we've just signed its death warrant." "There has to be an antidote," I said. "There is," Webb replied. "But it requires a massive amount of a specific enzyme. An enzyme that only exists in one place, the Tethys home city, at 27,000 feet below." I looked at the dying hybrids around me, at the poisoned water spreading out into the Gulf Stream. "How long do we have?" 6 hours, maybe less. I made the decision that would define the rest of my life. "We're going down there. Webb, you're coming with me. You know the antidote formula. Sarah, can you still guide us?" She nodded weakly. "I can feel the city calling, even through the poison. But Tom, the pressure will kill you. Then I'll have to transform on the way down." Morrison grabbed my arm. "Sheriff, partial transformation might not be enough. You'll need to go all the way, become one of us completely. There's no coming back from that. If I don't go, there's nothing to come back to anyway." We commandeered a Navy submarine, one specially modified for the deep trenches. The crew was half transformed already, volunteers who understood what was at stake. As we descended, I submitted to the transformation process, feeling my body change, my consciousness expand. At 5,000 feet, my lungs adapted, filling with a specialized fluid that allowed oxygen exchange at pressure. At 10,000 feet, my skin began to change, scales providing protection against the crushing depth. At 15,000 feet, my vision altered, seeing in spectrums beyond human perception. At 20,000 feet, I began to hear them, the collective consciousness of the Tethys, weak and dying but still present. And at 27,000 feet, we arrived at their city. It was magnificent and horrible. Structures of living coral and metal that defied geometry, powered by thermal vents and bioluminescence. But the streets, if you could call them that, were littered with dying Tethys, their forms dissolving in the poisoned water. We found their leader, or what they considered a leader, a being of immense age and wisdom, its form so alien I can barely describe it. Imagine a mountain of crystallized water with 1,000 eyes and voice like the tide itself. Human, it said to my mind. You come as we die? Is this your species' answer? Extinction for all rather than evolution? No, I replied, my own voice now capable of the harmonic communication. We come to save you, to save everyone. Webb, in an atmospheric suit, worked frantically with the Tethys scientists, beings of pure energy contained in coral shells, to synthesize the antidote. But we needed more of the enzyme than existed in any single location. There is a way, the Tethys leader said, but it requires sacrifice. One of us must dissolve completely into the enzyme. It will cure the poison, but destroy the individual. I'll do it, Sarah said without hesitation. She had followed us down, her transformation allowing her to survive where even the submarine couldn't go. No, I said, there has to be another way. There isn't, she replied, and I could feel her certainty through our shared consciousness. Tom, I was the first to be transformed at the station. My genetics are the most stable hybrid. It has to be me. Before anyone could stop her, she swam to the enzyme production facility, a massive, organic structure that looked like a beating heart made of coral. She placed her hands on it and began to glow. I watched as Dr. Sarah, brilliant scientist and brave soul, dissolved into pure biological energy, her consciousness spreading through the enzyme, through the water, through every molecule of the ocean. Her last thought, transmitted to all of us, was simply, peace. The antidote spread faster than the poison, neutralizing it, saving both species. But the cost was immeasurable. The journey back to the surface took 12 hours. By the time we reached the Keys, the world had changed irrevocably. The revelation of the Tethys, the attempted genocide by the Terra Firma Alliance, and the sacrifice of the hybrids who saved both species had shifted humanity's perception of everything. I emerged from the submarine no longer fully human. My transformation was complete but different from the others. The deep exposure to the Tethys city, the absorption of their knowledge, had made me something unique, a true bridge between species. The President addressed the nation that evening, July 5, 1975. Half his cabinet stood behind him, showing various stages of transformation. He announced the formal treaty between humanity and the Tethys, the establishment of joint colonies, and the beginning of what he called the Aquatic Age. The Terra Firma Alliance was designated a terrorist organization. Its leaders were arrested, though many committed suicide rather than face transformation as punishment. Webb, broken by guilt over his role in creating the poison, volunteered for transformation as penance. He became one of the most dedicated advocates for human Tethys cooperation. I returned to my role as sheriff, though the job was now vastly different. The Keys became the first hybrid economic zone, where transformed and traditional humans lived side by side. We had to develop new laws, new ways of thinking about crime and justice when half your population could breathe underwater and communicate telepathically. The transformation wasn't mandatory, but it became increasingly common. Parents transformed to be with their children who had chosen the change. Elderly people transformed to escape the limitations of aging bodies. Scientists transformed to access Tethys knowledge. Within 6 months, 30% of the Keys population was hybrid. The fishing industry evolved into something entirely new: cooperative ventures with Tethys, who could herd fish without nets, who could farm the ocean floor without destroying it. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. The first major challenge came in December 1975. A group of transformed humans led by a former Navy SEAL named Captain Rex Harrison declared that hybrids were superior to baseline humans and should rule. They called themselves the New Tide and began attacking human-owned businesses, trying to drive non-transformed people from the Keys. I had to stop them, but the challenge was complex. How do you arrest someone who can disappear into the ocean? How do you hold someone who can dissolve into water itself? The answer came from the Tethys themselves. They were appalled by the New Tide's supremacist ideology. The collective consciousness that Sarah had joined before her sacrifice still existed in the ocean itself, and through it, she spoke to me. Tom. Her voice came through the water one night as I stood on the dock. The New Tide violates everything we died to protect. Both species, all consciousness, must be valued equally. With her guidance and the Tethys' help, we developed new containment methods: electromagnetic fields that prevented transformation, specialized cells that could hold water-form beings. The New Tide was stopped, but the incident raised questions about the future of law enforcement in this new world. By early 1976, the transformation had spread globally. Coastal cities worldwide reported significant hybrid populations. Venice became the first fully hybrid city, its residents choosing transformation rather than watching their city sink. The Netherlands converted entirely, their battle against the sea ending in synthesis with it. But the real change was in human consciousness itself. Those who transformed reported a connection not just to the Tethys, but to the ocean as a living entity. They could feel its pain from pollution, its joy in healthy reefs. Environmental destruction became physically painful to hybrids, leading to the fastest ecological reforms in history. The space program took an unexpected turn. The Tethys revealed that certain deep ocean trenches were connected to what they called pressure points, areas where space-time was compressed, allowing near instantaneous travel to other parts of the universe. NASA partnered with Tethys explorers to investigate these phenomena. In March 1976, the first hybrid astronaut, transformed specifically for space exploration, traveled through a pressure point near the Mariana Trench and emerged in the ocean of Europa, Jupiter's moon. She found life there, cousins of the Tethys, who had been separated millions of years ago. Back in the Keys, I dealt with the day-to-day realities of this new world. Transformed kids who could swim to Cuba for lunch needed new kinds of supervision. Marriages between humans and hybrids raised legal questions about property rights when one spouse could literally become water. The Catholic Church declared transformation a sin against God's design. The Pope himself condemned it until a hybrid cardinal showed him visions of Christ walking on water, suggesting maybe this was part of the divine plan all along. The church split, with coastal parishes embracing transformation while inland churches rejected it. Crime evolved too. Drug runners used transformed mules who could swim underwater for miles, carrying product in specialized organs. Hackers discovered they could interface with Tethys biocomputers, creating new forms of cybercrime. Murder became complicated when victims could sometimes be revived by reconnecting them to the collective consciousness. I found myself changing beyond the physical transformation. The Tethys knowledge I'd absorbed gave me understanding of patterns, connections between events that seemed unrelated. I could sense crimes before they happened, feel the disturbances in the collective consciousness. Sarah's presence was always there, distributed through the ocean but still distinctly her. She became the Key's guardian spirit, warning of hurricanes days before satellites detected them, guiding lost swimmers home, sometimes manifesting as phosphorescent writing in the water to communicate important messages. One night, a year after the transformation began, she appeared to me more solidly than usual, the water taking her old form. "Tom," she said, "I need to show you something." She led me to a deep channel off Key West, where the water glowed with an unusual light. There, rising from the depths, was something new. Structures that were neither fully Tethys nor human design, but a fusion of both. Buildings that breathed, streets that filtered water, homes that grew from coral but with human comfort in mind. The first hybrid city, she explained. Not replacing the surface, but complementing it. This is what we're building together. The city was named New Tethys, and within months it had a population of 10,000. It existed in both worlds, sections above water for traditional humans, sections below for hybrids, and transition zones where both could interact comfortably. By summer 1976, 1 year after first contact, the world map had to be redrawn. Not just politically, but dimensionally. Ocean cities appeared on charts. Shipping routes went over and under the water. The UN established a new council with both human and Tethys representatives, but resistance remained. The Terra Firma Alliance, though officially destroyed, had splinter cells. They released targeted viruses designed to kill hybrids. They sabotaged transformation centers. They assassinated pro-transformation politicians. On July 4th, 1976, the American bicentennial, they made their biggest attack. Coordinated strikes on hybrid cities worldwide, using a new weapon. Sonic disruptors that could shatter the crystalline structures in hybrid cells, causing agonizing death. The attack killed thousands before we stopped it. But the response wasn't revenge. Instead, the hybrid community did something unexpected. They forgave. They offered the terrorists transformation, a chance to understand what they feared. Some accepted. The moment of transformation, feeling the connection to all ocean life, understanding the Tethys perspective, changed them completely. Former Terra Firma leaders became the strongest advocates for coexistence. One of them, General Marcus Stone, who had planned the sonic attacks, said, after his transformation, "I thought I was saving humanity. I didn't realize I was trying to kill its future. The ocean doesn't replace our humanity. It enhances it." Not everyone transformed. Maybe 40% of humanity chose to remain traditional human. But the relationship between the two groups stabilized. Hybrid and human marriages became common. Children were given the choice at 18 whether to transform or remain human. Technology advanced rapidly. Tethys bioengineering revolutionized medicine. Cancer became curable when doctors could literally communicate with cells. Mental illness was treated through selective connection to the collective consciousness. Aging slowed dramatically for those who chose partial transformation. The Keys became a model for the world. We showed that humans and hybrids could coexist. That transformation didn't mean losing humanity, but expanding it. Tourism boomed as people came to swim with Tethys, to see the hybrid cities, to experience the collective consciousness temporarily through guided meditation. My job as sheriff evolved into something unprecedented. I became a mediator between species, a bridge between worlds. I handled crimes that crossed the boundary between air and water. between individual and collective consciousness. I wrote new laws for a new world, establishing precedents that would guide civilization for generations. But the biggest change was personal. I fell in love with a Tethys. Her name was unpronounceable in human language, but she went by Marina when dealing with humans. She was ancient, older than human civilization, but curious about our young species. She had taken a form similar to humans to interact with us, though she could shift into pure energy when needed. Our relationship challenged everything I thought I knew about love, compatibility, even existence itself. How do you love someone who experiences time differently, who exists partially in dimensions you can't perceive, who remembers when Earth had different continents? You learn, you adapt, you transform in ways beyond the physical. We were married in December 1976, in a ceremony that took place simultaneously above and below water, conducted in harmony between human ministers and Tethys elders. Sarah manifested in the water to give her blessing, her consciousness brightening the ocean for miles. The world watched, as it was the first formal human-Tethys marriage. Some called it an abomination. Others called it the future. I just called it love. Marina and I had children. Yes, it was possible. They were something entirely new, born already adapted to both worlds, carrying the knowledge of both species in their DNA. They could shift between forms at will, speak all languages instantly through the collective, and perceive dimensions beyond the standard four. Our daughter, Pearl, became the first hybrid-born sheriff when I retired in 2000. Our son, Current, became an explorer, mapping the pressure points that connected Earth's oceans to other worlds. As I write this in 2025, 50 years after that first terrible night at the research station, the world is unrecognizable from the one I knew. Sea levels rose as predicted, but it didn't matter. We adapted. Cities float and swim. Humans explore other worlds through ocean portals. The Tethys teach us about the universe's deep mysteries. The transformation isn't complete. There are still holdout communities, still tensions between human and hybrid. But we're learning, growing, evolving together. Sometimes I visit the memorial we built for Dr. Sarah at Sugarloaf Key. It's a structure that exists both above and below water, where her distributed consciousness is strongest. Visitors can commune with her, feel her presence, understand her sacrifice. Was it worth it? I asked her once. Look around you, Tom, she replied, her voice coming from the waves themselves. Look at what we've become, what we're becoming. We didn't just save two species, we created something new, something better. Yes, it was worth it. The Keys remain the heart of this new world. Every sunset, humans and hybrids gather on the beaches and in the shallows, watching the sun disappear into the Gulf. Some pray to traditional gods, others to the ocean itself. Children play in the surf, some with lungs, some with gills, some with both. And sometimes, late at night, when the moon is full and the water is calm, you can see them in the deep. The Tethys in their true forms, massive and ancient and beautiful, watching over us all. They don't rule us or serve us. They share with us as we share with them. The conspiracy was real. There were creatures in the deep. The government did hide the truth. But the real conspiracy was bigger than any of us imagined. It was evolution itself, pushing us toward something greater. The secret wasn't that monsters lived in the ocean. The secret was that we were meant to join them, to become something more than human or Tethys. We were meant to become Earth's children, all of us, united in protecting our blue world as we reach for the stars through the deep waters that connect all things. My name is Sheriff Tom Brennan, and I was born human. I'll die as something more. And in between, I've lived through humanity's greatest transformation. The water remembers everything. And now, so do we. Sheriff Dale Morrison, Okaloosa County, Florida, Panhandle. 43 years I wore this badge, from 1959 to 2002. Dealt with spring breakers, drug smugglers, and enough hurricane damage to rebuild the coast 3 times over. But what happened in the fall of 1982, in the pine forests north of Crestview? That's what made me believe that some evils are older than Florida itself. October 3rd, 1982. The morning mist was still clinging to the pine forests when I got the call. Deputy Rick Hawkins, young kid fresh from Tallahassee, voice shaking over the radio. "Sheriff, we got multiple bodies out here on Highway 90, about 10 miles east of Crestview. You're going to want to see this yourself." The Panhandle was different from the rest of Florida. Up here we had hills, actual hills, covered in longleaf pines and turkey oaks. The Spanish moss hung like funeral shrouds, and the morning fog could turn familiar roads into something from a nightmare. This October had been unusually cold, and the fog was thicker than I'd seen in years. I drove my Crown Vic through that soup, following the flashing lights of emergency vehicles. The scene was just off the highway, down an old logging road that hadn't been used since the 60s. 3 patrol cars, an ambulance, and surprisingly, a military vehicle from Eglin Air Force Base. Rick met me at the perimeter, his face pale beneath his tan. "Sheriff, I've never seen anything like this." He led me through the pines to a small clearing. 5 bodies, arranged in a perfect circle, each one facing outward. They were naked, skin so white it almost glowed in the morning light filtering through the trees. But it was their condition that made my blood run cold. They'd been mummified. In the humid Florida Panhandle, where bodies decomposed in days, these corpses looked like they'd been dried out over centuries. The skin was like leather, stretched tight over bones. But the medical examiner, Dr. Louise Harper, said they'd only been dead for maybe 48 hours. "How's that possible?" I asked. Louise, a tough woman who'd seen everything in her 20 years on the job, just shook her head. "It's not, Dale. Not naturally. Something drained every drop of moisture from these bodies. Not just blood, everything. They're like beef jerky. Animals? Insects? No bite marks, no punctures, nothing. It's like the moisture was just extracted through the skin itself." I studied the victims. 3 men, 2 women, all appearing to be in their 20s or 30s. No obvious injuries except for one detail. Their mouths were open in silent screams, and inside, their tongues were black. IDs? Nothing yet. No clothes, no vehicles nearby. It's like they just appeared here. That's when Colonel James Patterson from Eglin approached. I knew Jim from various joint operations. The base was huge, covering most of 3 counties, and we often coordinated on things. "Sheriff Morrison, we need to talk. Privately." We walked away from the scene, into the darker parts of the forest. Jim was career military, not given to dramatics, so when he looked nervous I paid attention. "Dale, we've been tracking something out here for weeks. Unusual energy readings, electromagnetic anomalies. Started right after we lost a reconnaissance aircraft over this area." "Lost how?" "It disappeared from radar at 15,000 feet. No distress call, no wreckage. Just gone. But the last readings showed massive electromagnetic interference, like nothing we've ever recorded." "And you think it's connected to these bodies?" "Last night, our sensors went crazy. Same kind of readings, but at ground level, centered right here." He pulled out a map, pointing to several marked locations. "These aren't the first bodies, Dale. We've found similar scenes on base property. 3 incidents in the last month, 15 bodies total. We've been keeping it quiet, investigating internally. You've been hiding multiple murders in my county?" "Not hiding, investigating. This is beyond civilian law enforcement, Dale. Hell, It might be beyond military capability. Before I could respond, Rick's voice crackled over the radio. "Sheriff, we got another one. Fresh. She's still alive." We ran back to find the team gathered around a young woman who'd stumbled out of the woods. She was naked, disoriented, but unlike the bodies, she still had normal skin color. Dr. Harper was checking her vitals while trying to cover her with a blanket. The woman was mumbling, her eyes unfocused. But as I got closer, I could make out words. The dark between the trees. It drinks everything. "Ma'am, I'm Sheriff Morrison. You're safe now. What's your name?" Her eyes suddenly focused on me, filled with absolute terror. "They're not dead, the dry ones, they're not dead. They walk at night, looking for moisture, looking for life to steal. Who did this to you? Not who. What? It's older than the Creeks, older than the Spanish. The Seminoles knew. They called it the dry dark. It sleeps in the deep forest, but something woke it up." She grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "The planes, the military planes flying over, their radar, their signals. It woke up the dry dark, and now it's hungry, so hungry." Then she started seizing. Dr. Harper tried to stabilize her, but within minutes the transformation began. Her skin started to dry out, moisture literally evaporating from her body. We watched in horror as she mummified before our eyes, going from living person to desiccated corpse in less than 5 minutes. "Everyone back!" I shouted. "Nobody touch her!" But it was too late. Deputy Tom Garrett had been holding her hand, trying to comfort her. The desiccation spread from the contact point, racing up his arm. He screamed, trying to pull away, but it was like he was stuck. "Cut it off!" Dr. Harper yelled. "Cut off his arm!" I drew my knife. But before I could act, Tom's entire body dried out, moisture flowing from him into the ground like water into sand. Within seconds, he was another mummy, standing upright for a moment before collapsing into leather and bones. "Jesus Christ," Jim breathed. "It's contagious." That's when we heard it. A sound like wind through dry leaves, but rhythmic, deliberate. The 5 original bodies were moving. Not much, just slight twitches, but their heads were turning toward us. "Run," I said, then louder. "Everyone run! Get to the vehicles!" We fled through the pines, the sound of rustling getting closer. I glanced back once and saw them. The mummified corpses, moving with jerky, unnatural gaits, reaching out with desiccated hands. They weren't fast, but they were relentless. We made it to the vehicles, but Rick's patrol car wouldn't start. The engine turned over, but immediately died. Jim checked his military vehicle. Same problem. "EMP," Jim said. "Electromagnetic pulse. Whatever's causing this, it's interfering with the electronics." My old Crown Vic, with its simple engine, was the only vehicle that started. We piled in, 7 of us in a car meant for 5, and I floored it out of there. In the rearview mirror, I saw the mummies emerge from the tree line, standing in the road, watching us flee. Back at the sheriff's station in Crestview, I called an emergency meeting. Every deputy, the state police, even the FBI field office in Tallahassee. But it was Jim Patterson who brought the most disturbing information. "Gentlemen, what I'm about to show you is classified," he began, setting up a projector. "But given the circumstances, you need to know what we're dealing with." The images he showed were from military surveillance flights over the Blackwater River State Forest, the massive wilderness area north of Crestview. The photos showed clearings similar to where we'd found the bodies, but from above, they formed a pattern, a massive spiral with each clearing as a point. "This pattern has been forming for months," Jim explained. "Each incident site is precisely placed. Whatever's doing this, it's not random. It's creating something. A symbol, maybe, or a summoning circle, said a voice from the doorway. We all turned to see an elderly Native American man, dressed in worn jeans and a flannel shirt. I recognized him. Robert Crow Feather, one of the last full-blooded Creek Indians in the area, lived on the reservation near Blackwater. "Mr. Crow Feather," I said, "what do you know about this?" "More than you want to hear, Sheriff. My grandfather told me the stories passed down from before the Trail of Tears. The dry dark, the thirst that walks. It's been sleeping under the Blackwater Forest for centuries. The creek knew to leave it alone, to never disturb certain places." "But the military base," Jim said, understanding dawning on his face. "Our low-level flights, the radar installations. You've been pounding the earth with your invisible waves, shaking it awake. And now it's feeding, growing stronger with each feeding." "How do we stop it?" I asked. Robert pulled out an old leather pouch. "The old ways. Water blessed by lightning, salt from tears of grief, and fire that's never known wood, only bone." He looked at each of us. "But first you need to understand what you're fighting." He told us the legend. The dry dark was something that came before humans, before animals, maybe before life itself. It existed in the spaces between, in the gaps in reality. It fed on life force, on the water that made life possible. The creek had found a way to put it to sleep, to bind it with rituals and sacrifices. "But bindings wear thin," Robert said. "And your technology, your electromagnetic signals, they're like acid on the old bindings." Over the next 2 days, we tried to establish a perimeter around the affected area. But the dry dark was spreading. More bodies appeared, always in groups of 5, always arranged in circles. And worse, the mummified corpses were multiplying. Everyone who died to the dry dark rose again, searching for moisture to steal. The town of Crestview itself came under threat when a group of mummies wandered in from the forest. They attacked the water treatment plant, drawn to the massive reserves of water. We managed to stop them with fire. Regular fire seemed to work, turning their desiccated bodies to ash. But for every one we destroyed, 2 more seemed to appear. Dr. Harper made a disturbing discovery. The victims weren't chosen randomly. Blood tests on the few survivors who'd escaped the circles before dying showed they all had a specific genetic marker, a rare sequence that less than 1% of the population carried. "It's hunting specific people," she told me. "People with this marker, like it's trying to collect a specific set." Jim's team, meanwhile, had detected a massive electromagnetic anomaly deep in the Blackwater Forest. "It's like there's a hole in reality itself," he explained. "Our instruments can't make sense of it." On October 7th, day 4 of the crisis, we got a break. A survivor, fully conscious and seemingly unaffected, was found wandering near the edge of the forest. Marcus Webb, a grad student from FSU who'd been camping in the area. "I saw it," he told us, his hands shaking as he drank his 5th glass of water. "The thing at the center, it's not from here, not from Earth." He described something that shouldn't exist, a being made of absence, a void. It existed in the spaces between atoms, in the dark between stars. When it manifested physically, it looked like a moving shadow that desiccated everything it touched. "It spoke to me," Marcus continued. "Not in words, but in dryness. It showed me visions of other worlds it had consumed, turned into dust bowls, lifeless husks. Earth is just its latest feeding ground." "Why didn't it take you?" I asked. "I don't have the marker," he said. "The genetic sequence it needs. It's not just feeding, it's collecting specific genetic material. It needs exactly 125 people with the marker." That's when it can fully manifest, fully anchor itself to our reality. "How many has it taken?" Jim asked. I did the math. If our count is right, 118. "7 more," Robert Crowfeather said. "7 more, and it becomes permanent, unstoppable." We had to act fast. Robert said there was a way, a ritual the creek had used centuries ago to force it back to sleep. But it required specific elements, and, more importantly, a sacrifice. Someone with the genetic marker had to willingly enter the void, carrying the binding elements, sealing it from the inside. "It's a death sentence," Robert said plainly. "Whoever does this won't come back." We tested everyone. Deputies, military personnel, volunteers. Out of nearly 200 people, only 3 had the marker. One was Louise Harper. Another was a young airman from Eglin. The third was me. The night of October 8th, we prepared for the ritual. Robert Crowfeather had gathered what we needed: water that had been struck by lightning, collected from a storm earlier that year; salt made from evaporated tears from a creek funeral ceremony; and bone fire and phosphorus from cremated remains. These elements would create a barrier the dry dark couldn't cross, but they had to be activated from inside its realm. Jim had his men set up a perimeter around the anomaly site, using flamethrowers to keep the mummies at bay. The forest was crawling with them now. We estimated over 200, all searching for moisture, for life. "I should be the one to go," Louise said. We were standing at the edge of the anomaly, a space between 2 ancient pines where reality seemed to warp. "I'm older. I've lived my life." "No," I said. "I'm the sheriff. Protecting this county is my job." The young airman, Tommy, stepped forward. "With respect, sir, I'm military. This started because of our operations. It should be one of us who—" The argument was cut short by an attack. Mummies burst from the underbrush, moving faster than before, more coordinated. As we fought them off, I made my decision. While the others were distracted, I grabbed the ritual elements and dove into the anomaly. The sensation was like being turned inside out while drowning in sand. I found myself in a place that wasn't a place, a void between realities where the dry dark lived. It was vast, endless, and utterly hostile to life. The entity noticed me immediately. It didn't have a form exactly, but rather was an absence of form, a moving void that desiccated reality itself. When it spoke, it was like having moisture pulled from my thoughts. "You carry the mark. You will complete the collection." "No," I said, holding up the lightning water. It glowed in this place, a beacon of life in the void. "I'm here to send you back to sleep." Sleep is temporary. Hunger is eternal. Your world is so full of water, so full of life. We will drain it all. We, it said we. I realized with horror that the dry dark wasn't one entity, but a collective. A species of void beings that moved from world to world, draining them of life. I started the ritual Robert had taught me, speaking words in Creek that I barely understood. The salt tears formed a circle around me, keeping the entity at bay. The bone fire created light in the absolute darkness. But I needed to reach the center, the anchor point where the dry dark was trying to fully manifest. As I moved deeper into the void, I saw them, the 118 people it had taken. They weren't dead, not exactly. They existed in a state of perfect desiccation, their consciousness trapped in bodies without moisture. They were aware, suffering, eternal prisoners. Among them, I recognized faces from the missing persons reports we'd been accumulating. Men, women, even children, all with that genetic marker that made them suitable for the entity's purpose. "I'm going to free you," I promised, though I wasn't sure how. At the center of the void was something like a heart, a pulsing absence that was drawing energy from our world, preparing to fully manifest. I had to destroy it, but touching it would mean instant desiccation. Then I remembered something Robert had said. The dry dark fears only one thing: the possibility of drowning in life itself. I took the lightning water and drank it, all of it. The effect was immediate and agonizing. In this void, where moisture couldn't exist, I had become a paradox, a being full of charged water in a place of absolute dryness. My body began to glow, then burn with internal light. The dry dark recoiled. Impossible. You will destroy yourself. Maybe, I said, walking toward the heart, but I'll take you with me. I embraced the heart of the void. The explosion of opposites, life and void, moisture and desiccation, existence and absence, created a shock wave that rippled through realities. The void began to collapse, the dry dark shrieking in frequencies that shattered thought itself. The 118 trapped souls were freed, their consciousness returning to whatever came after death. The mummies in our world collapsed into dust, and the dry dark was forced back into dormancy, sealed by the paradox of water in the void. But I was trapped in the collapse. I should have died. By all laws of physics and reality, I should have been annihilated in the collision between existence and void. But something else happened. I found myself in a place between places. Not the void where the dry dark lived, but not our reality either. It was like standing in a room with walls made of possibility, where I could see our world but couldn't quite touch it. Time moved differently here. I watched from this in-between space as the search teams looked for my body. I saw Jim Patterson leading military teams to seal the anomaly sites with concrete and electromagnetic barriers. I witnessed Robert Crow Feather performing cleansing rituals at each location where people had died. I tried to communicate, to let them know I was alive, in a sense, but I was like a ghost, present but unable to interact. Days passed, then weeks. They held a memorial service for me. Louise Harper gave a eulogy that would have made me cry if I still had tears. But I wasn't alone in this space. The 118 souls freed from the dry dark were here too, in transition. They couldn't move on to whatever afterlife awaited them. Their essence had been too damaged by their time in the void. We existed together in this liminal space, watching the world but unable to rejoin it. One of them, a young teacher named Maria Santos, who'd been among the first taken, figured out how to communicate through water. Water held memory, she discovered, and in our state, we could imprint thoughts onto it. A message in rain, words in steam, images in ice. I managed to send a message to Louise through her morning coffee. The steam formed words. Not dead, trapped between, working on return. Louise, brilliant woman that she was, understood immediately. She gathered Robert Crow Feather and Jim Patterson, and together they began researching how to bring us back. The solution came from an unexpected source, the dry dark itself. Though dormant, it had left traces in our reality, thin spots where the barrier between dimensions was weak. These spots could be used as doorways, but opening them risked waking the entity again. Robert proposed a different approach. Rather than opening a door, they would strengthen our connection to water itself. Since water existed in all states and places simultaneously, as vapor and air, as ice, as liquid, it could serve as a bridge. The ritual took place on Halloween night, October 31st. They gathered at Blue Springs, one of the clearest natural springs in Florida, where the water was so pure it was almost otherworldly. Louise, Robert, Jim, and dozens of volunteers formed a circle around the spring. They each contributed water from their own bodies, tears, saliva, even blood. This human water was mixed with the spring water, creating a connection between the living and those trapped between. I felt the pull immediately. The water was calling us home, offering us a path back to reality. But there was a catch. We couldn't return as we were. The experience had changed us fundamentally. One by one, the 118 souls made their choice. Some chose to merge with the water cycle itself, becoming part of the rain and rivers, guardian spirits of moisture. Others chose to pass on, using the bridge to reach the proper afterlife. I chose to return to physical form, but the cost was significant. I came back changed. I emerged from Blue Springs gasping, solid but different. My body was there, but it was more fluid than before. I could feel every drop of water within miles, sense the moisture in the air, the underground aquifers, the blood in the people's veins. "Dale!" Louise rushed to help me from the water. "My God, you're back!" But when she touched me, she gasped. My skin was cold, and beneath it, she could feel movement, like water flowing just under the surface. "I'm back," I said, my voice carrying the sound of distant streams. But I'm not the same. Over the following weeks, we discovered the extent of my transformation. I could survive without food, drawing sustenance from humidity in the air. I could sense the dry dark's presence, feeling when it stirred in its sleep. I had become a living monitor, a warning system against its return. 5 others had made the same choice I did, returning changed. We formed a new kind of task force, stationed at key points around the Panhandle, watching for signs of the dry dark's awakening. The military modified their flight paths, avoiding the sensitive areas. They developed new scanning technology that could detect void anomalies without triggering them. The incident stopped, but the threat remained. The cover story was elegant in its simplicity. A chemical spill from an old military depot had caused hallucinations and deaths. The EPA came in, declared areas off limits, and the truth was buried under bureaucracy. But those of us who knew the truth remained vigilant. As sheriff, I continued my duties, though I had to be careful. I couldn't shake hands anymore. The water under my skin unsettled people. I worked nights mostly, when the humidity was higher and I felt strongest. My deputies knew something had changed, but they were loyal enough not to ask questions. Dr. Louise Harper studied my condition, trying to understand the biological impossibility of what I'd become. "You're not quite human anymore," she told me one day. "But you're not inhuman either. You're something new. Evolution through supernatural trauma." Robert Crow Feather had another interpretation. "You've become a bridge," he said, "between the world of substance and the world of void. The Creek have legends of such beings, warriors who sacrifice their humanity to guard against ancient evils." The other returnees and I met monthly, comparing notes, sharing experiences. We could sense things others couldn't, weak points in reality, places where the dry dark probed for entry. We'd respond to these incidents, using our water-infused nature to reinforce the barriers. Years passed. I aged, but slowly, the water in my system preserving me in ways that defied medical explanation. I watched Crestview grow, watched the forest get developed, always fighting to keep certain areas protected, knowing what slept beneath. In '99, the dry dark stirred significantly. Y2K, it turned out, wasn't just about computers. The massive electromagnetic surge from millions of systems switching over simultaneously sent ripples through dimensional barriers worldwide. We spent New Year's Eve not celebrating, but standing guard at the weak points, holding the line against something that wanted nothing more than to turn our world into a lifeless husk. We held, but barely. In 2002, I retired as sheriff, passing the badge to someone younger, but keeping my real job, guardian against the void. The other returnees and I formed a private organization, funded quietly by government black budgets, dedicated to monitoring and containing the dry dark. But I knew it was a temporary solution. The entity was eternal, patient. Each year, human technology grew more powerful, sending out signals that eroded the ancient bindings. Each year, the weak points grew weaker. Robert Crow Feather, before he died in 2005, gave me a final warning. The binding will fail completely in the next generation. When it does, you and the others will be humanity's last line of defense. He was right. I can feel it now, in 2023, as I write this account. The dry dark stirs more frequently. The mummies have started appearing again, just a few, but enough to know the seal is weakening. The other returnees and I grow stronger, more water than human now, preparing for the battle we know is coming. The Panhandle forests still hold their secrets. Hikers still disappear occasionally, though we usually find them before the dry dark can complete its feeding. The military base still operates, but with safeguards now, frequencies that reinforce rather than erode the barriers. But barriers don't last forever. Nothing does. Sometimes, on humid nights when the Spanish moss hangs heavy and the fog rolls in from the Gulf, I stand at the edge of the Blackwater forest and feel it. The vast, hungry absence that waits just beyond our reality. It knows I'm here. It remembers me, the one who drank lightning water and survived the void. And it hates me for it. But hate is just another form of moisture. Another thing it can't truly understand. The dry dark knows only hunger, only the need to drain. It doesn't understand sacrifice, love, the bonds that make humans pour out their water in tears for others. That's our advantage. That's what will save us when the barriers finally fall. We who returned from between, we who are more water than flesh now, we stand ready. When the dry dark rises again, and it will, we'll be waiting. Not just the 6 of us who came back changed, but the hundreds who merged with the water cycle, the guardian spirits in every raindrop. The next battle won't be like the last. It won't be about sending the dry dark back to sleep. It will be about transformation, teaching an entity of pure void that existence isn't about consumption, but about connection. Or we'll fail and Earth will become another drained husk floating in space. Either way, I'll be there, standing between the void and the world, a being of water facing off against eternal thirst. My name is Dale Morrison. I was sheriff of Okaloosa County. I died and returned, and I'm still protecting and serving just in ways the living can't quite understand. The Panhandle darkness is real. It waits, it hungers. But so do we who guard against it, and we're not going anywhere.